The story begins with the main character rang the alarm clock. He woke up and went into the bathroom. The guy's name was Shu Chauvin. The guy held out his hand to a glass with a toothbrush to brush his teeth. Zhui looked at his reflection in the mirror. The guy remembered that he was already 24 years old. The main character held out his hand and grabbed his clothes on the chair. Shui sharply threw himself on his clothes and prepared to run out of the house. He thought he was living well. The main character went down the stairs of the house to the lower floor. Near the entrance, two pensioners played cards at a table. The hostess strictly reminded the guy that it was time for him to pay for rent. Money had to be given before the weekend. Shui answered the old woman that he understood. The pensioner grabbed her husband by the clothes and shouted that he was embarrassed. Shui prepared to sit down behind his scooter. He remembered that his parents sent him from home when he grew up. The guy did not have a diploma, and therefore he had to fight for any work. Xu put his helmet on his head. He received a message that he had a new order, and he had to check it. The main character looked at the phone for a while. He prepared to leave for the execution of the order. Sui rushed at full speed on the street on a scooter. On the sidewalks it was deserted. The main flew past the superhero. The hero at that time in flight pursued the bandit and demanded that he lower the weapon. The bandit ran along the street at full speed and shouted to the pursuer that he could not catch up with him. The superhero shouted loudly that it was very simple for him. The ball caught fire in his hands. The hero attacked the bandit with a fireball. The criminal jumped and shouted that he was hot. The superhero cried joyfully that he would receive an excellent reward for the criminal. One of the passers-by told his friend that it would be dangerous to walk without superheroes to the street. The guy answered the partner that after the appearance of the superhero headquarters in the city, there were more criminals. There was a very bright explosion in the building. People on Earth were very scared. The superhero in a green suit held a girl in her arms and descended from a building on a rope. The hero gently put the girl on the ground and said that she was now safe. The stranger touched the hero's chest with her hand and thanked him. The savior smiled at the surrounding people and said that they would thank him and leave 5 stars in the review. The main character on the go noticed how a superhero jumped up on a rope above the street. All this was watched by surprised passers-by. Shui drove up on a moped to the store. He remembered that he was a cultivator in his last life. The seller held a bag in his hands. He told the guy with a smile that he had a dozen orders daily. He asked if the guy has enough money to live. The man handed the main character of the bag of food. He told him that his buyers write praise about him. Shui could deliver more orders and become one among the couriers. The main character was scared that he could be the first. He was holding bags with an order. The man was worried. He studied the protagonist in appearance. Shu turned around to leave. Shui drove away from the store. The man looked after him for a long time. The seller looked scared after the head hero and told himself that he might have something either answered the guy. Shui rode along the street. He thought displeasedly that his every life ends at 25. The guy poorly remembered his past reincarnations. In all his past lives, he became the best in any lesson. In past lives, accidents regularly happened to the guy and he was dying. Sei remembered that in one of the past lives he became a successful ruler and was sitting on the throne. The maid stood nearby. The guy on the throne in a joyful voice told himself that he would never die in this life. Suddenly the ruler felt how he became ill. He choked on food. The guy rushed to the ground. He suffocated from behind the seed of melon. The maids were very scared. The main character was driving along the street. He decided in this life not to waste strength and follow the plan. He wanted to live up to 80 years. The guy heard a conversation in the lane. Someone strictly demanded that the partner have cash instead of a card. The girl ran on the street with her hands stretched forward. She shouted to someone to get out. The main character stood and carefully watched the stranger. She fled in his direction. She, with great surprise, noticed how the girl jumped at full speed and flew over him. In the flight, the stranger suddenly clung to her body for the protagonist, and he began to fall from a moped. The main character lay on earth. A stranger fell on top of him. Zhui came to his senses and grabbed his head with his hand. He wanted to tell the girl that he needed something. The stranger scaredly shouted to the guy that she needed help. She said she wanted to rob her. The main character, or lying on the ground, told the stranger that if she is afraid to call the police, she can call superheroes. The girl was very scared and unhappy. She turned and looked aside. The stranger with a prayer asked the protagonist of help. She said she was scared and they could kill her. Shui thought deeply. He did not know if he needed to help the stranger now. The girl looked at the guy displeased and decided that he considered money and time. The guy turned around displeasedly and told the girl that he wants to sit in silence and calculate. The stranger asked her partner with surprise if he had superpowers and can he read thoughts. Zhui turned his head to the side and told the girl that she was very predictable. He asked her to be slower. A bandit appeared in the side of the side. He strictly asked the girl how she dared to escape from him. The bandit was called Lin Kui. He was a professional thug and possessed cold abilities. He viciously demanded from the girl to pay him debts. Lin angrily looked at the girl next to the main character and said that an ordinary courier would not help her pay off her debts. The protagonist shoved the girl with his hand to the side. He remembered that he needed to be in time. The stranger strictly asked the guy, why does he push her away? The stranger grabbed the protagonist by the clothes. She did not want him to leave her here alone. The girl held the guy by the clothes and asked if he would just leave her. Shui replied to her that he had to leave. Lin went to the main character and sternly said that he would do business. Shu sat on the moped very displeased. The girl behind him angrily asked him what kind of person he was. Lin grabbed the guy for his clothes, strictly asked why he was looking down on him. Around the bandit, flying blue fragments appeared. He viciously told the guy that he would not dare to speak to him in such a tone. The bandit sternly told the main character that he is the leader of the local slum. No one dares to look down on him. The main character put his hand to his head and said in a displeased voice that all this was very troublesome. Lin scaredly noticed how the guy disappeared sharply in front of him. The bandit looked fearfully in front of him and noticed that the guy disappeared somewhere. Zhui jumped on the hooligan on the side and prepared to hit him with all his strength. The protagonist, in flight with all his might, hit his leg of a frightened bandit. Lin did not have time to defend himself from the blow. The guy's leg hit him straight on the face. The protagonist swung his foot with all his might and hit the belly attacked. Lin, after a strong attack from the guy, flew far aside in the lane. An angry bandit held out his hands in front of him. He decided to use the ice shield to hide from the attack. Lin saw great power in front of him and was frightened. A huge predatory dragon with an open mouth appeared in front of him. The main character sharply jumped up and swung his foot against the opponent. There was a very strong explosion and bright fire. Shui flew far to the side. The main character looked aside and noticed how the attacker of the bandit lay in a penetrated opening in the wall. The frightened Shu, with excitement, reminded himself that he needed to be in time for delivery. The girl was surprised due to the fact that the protagonist won with the help of one blow of an opponent of the 4th level. Shui prepared to get off the moped and wanted to make up for the missed. The stranger, with excitement, followed the main character. She climbed into her bag to get something. The stranger held the phone in her hands. Some sensors shone on the screen. The girl looked with interest at the phone monitor. She saw a computer image of leaving the protagonist. The stranger looked at the phone with excitement and did not understand who the main character is. Zhui went to the door of the client with the phone in his hand. The buyer did not answer calls. The main character wrote a message on the phone. He indicated to the client to take his order on the door handle. Zhui hung a bag on the door handle and turned to leave. He thought to himself that he had time in time. The girl on the street looked joyfully as the police carried away the bully. She decided to herself that she could still wait with the payment of debt. The girl turned to the side and noticed how a message came to her phone. The stranger read the message from the protagonist. He wrote to the client that his order was hanging on the door handle. The protagonist had a bad day. The owner of the building raised a rent for him. Sui had to pay 500 yuan for living every month. The rise in price violated all his plans. The main character sat near the computer and considered his costs. He needed to pick up at least 120 orders every month. Zhui looked displeased into the phone. He calculated that he had to complete 360 orders in 3 days. The owner of the building invited the main character to rent a smaller room. The protagonist found an announcement on the internet that a room was rented on Sulfaku Street, next to the atmosphere of public transport. The price was only 400 yuan per month. Shui imagined as if he had been found dead and was frightened. Yishui thought displeased to himself that he could not spread his influence. He was scared that he could become the number alone. The protagonist was surprised to notice in the computer that he had received the answer very quickly. The owner wrote to the client on the internet so that he left contact information for him. Shui was surprised due to the fact that people still remained on such scored forums. The guy was unhappy that again in his life everything began to be easy to turn out. The partner sent the main character a very accurate address of the apartment and offered to drive up. Shui thought to himself that such an indifferent answer on the internet could be scrollful. He decided to play it safe. The guy reached out on his chair and remembered that it was already 10 hours. He needed to go to work. The protagonist was driving on a moped along the street. Around there was a battle of superheroes against the villains. There were explosions everywhere. Shui drove up on a moped and stopped near the building. A superhero flew above him. The guy thought to himself that the longer he lives, the more he had the opportunity to become a number one in any of the areas. The protagonist remembered that he had almost forgotten his previous lives. In one of these lives, he was an unconscious artist. He even helped his friend draw something. The number of views of the picture in one day was very large. As a result, the tablet was bursting, and the protagonist was shocked. The protagonist took off his helmet from his head. He thought to himself that he had enough money earned from delivery. He decided that being a courier is safe for him. Sui joyfully said that he had delivered an order in time and lived another day. The main character held the phone in his hands. It was already 6 hours and 30 minutes. The shooter had to come soon. The guy climbed the stairs. He considered himself that he could rent another third room. Su was delighted and thought to himself that misfortune helped him. The main character looked in surprise and saw how an unfamiliar girl was in front of him. Yu stood from the side and looked with interest at the stranger. She held a suitcase in her hands. The stranger looked in surprise at the protagonist. She recognized him. Shui asked the interlocutor, was she really contacting him this morning? The girl asked the guy, was it really his apartment? The main character stood near the door and told the girl that her room was inside. She approached him and said that she did not know what happened that day. Shui looked at the interlocutor and asked what was the same to do with him. The stranger showed her hand to the side and explained to the guy that this tool belongs to the association. They monitor everything. The interlocutor cunningly glanced at the protagonist and said that that day she was chasing her due to debts. She has no home and no money. Zui told the girl in a strict voice to return the money if she borrowed them. The stranger opened the door to the room. She told the guy with a smile that he should not leave her on the street. Shui displeasedly answered his new acquaintance that he did not allow her to stay here. The stranger stood inside the room. The main character threatened that he would call the police and demanded that she leave things. The girl struck the protagonist very slyly and smiled silently. The interlocutor looked at the protagonist and cunningly said that he had done so that she could not read his thoughts now. The association would not miss an unfinished person with the abilities of the 6th level. The girl looked angrily at the guy and said that he had a big secret. Shu angrily told the interlocutor that if he kills her, then no one would know about this secret. The girl began to take off their shoes and went into the room. She said that she wants to live in this place, as the windows overlook the sunny side. The stranger carefully looked around the room and said that she needed to paint her in pink. You also need to buy new furniture. Sui strictly asked the girl, did she really not understand what he had just told her? The guest slyly told the guy that he would not kill her anyway. She took off her outerwear. Shui was worried and shouted to the interlocutor that she could not just undress in a strange house. The stranger looked displeased at the guy and said that now it would be her house. She can wear the most comfortable clothes here. The protagonist pointed a finger at the girl with displeasure. He shouted that something bad could happen. The interlocutor was sitting on the couch. She answered the guy that she was the head of the information department of the association. The stranger confirmed that the storm is not expected. The protagonist was surprised to ask the interlocutor, is she really the head of the department? The stranger was sitting on the couch and with a smile answered the guy that she was the real head of the department. The girl seemed to ask the guy to rent her room. She said that he could give him a bail. Sui was very annoyed. He looked at the girl in displeasure. The guy carefully looked at the money in the hands of a stranger and prepared to take them. Sui turned away and told the girl that she would not lag behind him until he agrees to rent her a room. The stranger was delighted. The main character stopped in the room and looked at his new neighbor in surprise. The girl on the couch smiled slyly to the guy. She offered him to do something. The stranger in the apartment of the protagonist invited him to do a very important thing. The girl was lying on the bed and slyly looked at the guy. She asked him if he wanted to know what they would do. Zui looked at the girl in displeasure and said that he did not want anything at all. The stranger got up on the bed. She told the guy that she could alleviate his suffering. The girl raised her finger up and told the main character that he would die if he became the number alone. The main character strictly asked the interlocutor, how does she know all this? The girl slyly answered the guy that you can find out about everything if you set up such a goal. The main character strictly asked the interlocutor, is she really pursuing him? The stranger told the guy that she used to be the head of the intelligence department of the association. She followed suspicious objects. The girl asked the guy if he was interested. She turned away and told the girl with a displeased voice that she recognized his secret only because of his inattention. He did not want to discuss anything with her anymore. The stranger approached the guy and said that he did not want such an important secret to surfacing. The main character asked the interlocutor with displeasure, what does she need? The girl explained to the main character that she just wants to get rich. She had nothing against him. The main character silently and displeasedly looked at the stranger. He did not answer her. The interlocutor said to the guy in a serious voice that he is at the 6th level of abilities. The girl sat on the bed. She told the guy that he did not dare to join the association because of fear. The stranger told the partner that if he joins the association, he will not participate in testing. The guy will not have to work for wear and worry about his well-being. Shui answered the girl that she was using her position to help him. He did not understand why she did this. The stranger calmly looked at the guy and said that she was doing all this because of the money. The stranger told the main character that he could receive 500 yen per month from the association for completed tasks. She told the main character that they would divide the revenue in half. The guy strictly asked the girl if she was afraid that he would report to her. The stranger answered the partner that he would not do this if he did not want to die again. The girl slyly looked at her partner and said that she finds rare talents for the association. She can protect him and earn money. There was a loud knock on the door. The protagonist said that it was the owner of the house and decided to open the door for him. Zui sharply extended his hand to the front door and prepared to open it. The protagonist asked the stranger in the door with displeasure, "Who is she?" The girl stood and held a suitcase in her hands. She told the guy that her name is Van Eyck and she wants to rent a room in this place. Sui scaredly and surprisedly noted to himself that the beauty was facing in front of him. Van asked the guy with excitement, "Did she really cause him inconvenience?" He did not respond to her offer on the internet. The girl found Zuya at the address. Shui with a smile told the girl that he was still looking for a tenant. He had to go to work in the morning, and therefore he did not answer her. The protagonist invited the girl with a gesture to go to the apartment. Van thanked him. Sui scaredly thought to himself that he deleted his rental message on the internet. This post could become very popular and reach first place. The girl with a suitcase went into the apartment and carefully looked around. The guest went into the apartment and carefully looked around. She did not know which room she would live in. At this time, a stranger entered the room. She looked at Van and asked displeasedly who was this in front of her. Van looked in surprise at the stranger and said that she had come to rent a room here. A fun stranger hugged a guest and said that she was very sweet and could rent a room. The girl said that her name is Lin Mei Miao, and she had just moved here. Van joyfully told her new girlfriend that they would live together in harmony. Shu angrily looked at the girls and shouted to go away as soon as possible. Lin hugged her new girlfriend and asked the guy with displeasure, why should she leave? Suddenly, there was a very strong explosion in the room. The girls were scared. The girlfriends looked as a scared to the side and noticed how a large hole appeared in the ceiling. Zhui pointed his finger to the side of the hole in the wall and told the girls that for this they had to leave. From the ceiling, an unknown large fighter jumped through the hole into the room. The mercenary fell into the room on the floor unconscious. There were dust clubs around. The girls looked scaredly at the stranger and asked, was it really a terrorist attack? A dangerous and huge fighter appeared on the side. He sternly said that only a person with the abilities of the 3rd level dared to challenge him. Lucas was a member of the 3rd detachment. He possessed 5 abilities. The mercenary in an evil voice said that people from the association should not overestimate their capabilities. Lin raised her phone and with his help looked at Lucas. The girl carefully studied the fighter's body through the sensors on the phone. Lin shouted in a frightened voice that the fighter is at the 5th level and is a criminal. Van shouted in a frightened voice that she herself had only the 3rd level. Lucas stood in dust clubs. He asked the girl, is she really from the association too? Lin demanded from the bandit to give up as soon as possible. The association was supposed to send help soon. Lin thought to herself with the excitement that all members of the association should have learned about the explosion. She only needed to pull the time a little. Lucas angrily told the girl that he was from the 3rd detachment and was not afraid of any association. Lin angrily answered the criminal that she caught a gang members from the 3rd detachment. Lin, with excitement, thought to herself that the current attack is a good opportunity to test the ability of the protagonist. The girl in displeasure and angrily asked the guy, what is he doing this? The protagonist sealed the hole in the wall with the island. He answered the girl in a displeased voice that he was holding a hole. Shui thought displeasedly to himself that his dying ability would soon begin to act. He remembered that he had risked very often recently. He needed to be careful. The girl scaredly shouted to the main character that they had a 5th level criminal in their house. The guy answered the girls that these were their problems. He himself is an ordinary courier. The girl went to the main character and grabbed his hand by the clothes. Lin held his friend's hand and reminded him that great power was a great responsibility. The main character calmly answered the girl that he was not even released from kindergarten. Van shouted in a frightened voice to friends that now is not the time to argue for them. The bandit was very angry. Lucas was in the direction of the girls. He looked very angry. Van scaredly rushed to her friend and said that the bandits were coming here. She did not know what to do. Lucas rushed to run ahead of the girls and shouted that they were discharges from the association. The bandit in flight rushed at the girls and shouted angrily that they would die. Lin scaredly looked in front of her and realized that she had nowhere to run. The bandit swung his hand with all his might to knock the guy. Sui put a fist forward and defended himself. The main character turned to the side and looked at the girl lying on the ground. Lin looked in surprise at the guy said that he had saved them all. Lucas sternly told the main character that he could stop his blow. Sui thought about himself in displeasure that in all worlds, the villains speak the same template phrases. The bandit got angry. He told the main character that he himself should become more serious. Lucas began to knead his hands before the attack. His body darkened. The bandit hit the ground with all his might. He shouted to the main character that he was showing respect for his strength. Lucas looked strictly at the guy and asked if he knew what hell is. Zui said in a displeased voice that he himself was working in hell. He asked the bandit if he ever worked as a courier. Lucas got angry and rushed at full speed against his opponent. The bandit swung and hit the wall with all his might. The main character managed to evade. Shui looked at the opponent and demanded in a strict voice to pay him repairs. Lucas sternly shouted to the guy that if he died then he would not need any repair. Sui strictly explained to his partner that in his personal vocabulary, there was no word about death. The bandit continued to attack the protagonist from all sides. The guy continued to deftly dodge. The main character turned around and looked in surprise to the side of the destroyed apartment. She ran up in dismay and noticed that his sofa was very damaged. The main character looked aside and shouted that his refrigerator had suffered. Lucas laid a hand on top of a broken refrigerator. Lucas looked very viciously at the guy and said that he was very strong. The main character ran to the refrigerator and said in a joyful voice that he did not work. A surprised bandit looked at him. Lucas looked strictly at the guy and demanded that he become more seriously. The protagonist sharply swung his hand and hit the surprised bandit on the face. Lucas, after a very powerful blow from the guy, flew off and struck the ceiling. Shui shouted to the bandit after he would need to complete a lot of orders to make repairs. The bandit, after a very powerful blow from the protagonist, flew high above the ground into the stratosphere. Sui sat in dismay and looked at the refrigerator. He did not know what to do. Nearby stood surprised girls. The guy wrapped the refrigerator with electrical tape. He said that the furniture belongs to the homeowner and hoped that the man would not increase the rent. Lin looked at the protagonist on the side and decided that he had the gift of reading thoughts. The girl dreamily told herself that she would definitely get rich. A fighter woke up from the side. He said surprised girls about Lucas, a fifth criminal. The fighter sat down near the wall and asked the girls who they were. The main character stood near the refrigerator. He asked the guy when he woke up. The fighter put his hand to his head and said that he had chopped off at the very beginning of the battle. The main character asked the girl, what would they do? Their detachment was supposed to arrive soon. Lin scaredly thought that no one should learn about the real abilities of the protagonist. Zhu quarreled with the girl. He viciously told her that after their meeting, troubles fell upon him. Lin displeasedly answered the partner that she herself was also very much injured. On the side of everything, the bath carefully watched. Van thought and realized that the main character, along with a girlfriend, did not want someone to learn about everything that happened. Van told her partners in a surprised voice that she could help them. The girl extended her hand forward and a bright pink glow appeared near her finger. Van extended her hand forward and told the fighter that he was fighting Lucas. The guy was scared. He asked the girl, what is she doing? Van touched her finger with her finger. Lin said with surprise to the main character that Van has a special ability. The main character answered the interlocutor that all this is a very reliable way. The fighter sat on the ground and repeated to himself that he was fighting Lucas. Van looked joyfully at the guy and told him with a smile that everything was ready. The girl in a cunning voice told her partners that she replaced the fighter's memories. Lin could not understand why the girl was still not registered with the association. Van owned hypnosis. Hypnosis and reading of thoughts are very rare abilities. The owners of such abilities are the first to be registered in associations. Such special skills open many doors. Lin slyly looked at the protagonist and thought that their life together would be very interesting. A group of girls appeared on the side. They asked for permission to enter. Shui continued to wrap the broken refrigerator with electrical tape. The main character looked through the hole in the wall and asked the guests who they were. The stranger introduced herself and said that they are members of the association from the strip detachment. Her name was Jin Shan. She was the secretary of the head of the clearance detachment and asked the guy, "Can they go?" Shui looked carefully at the girls and said that of course they could come in. The cleansing department is engaged in the fact that it removes the consequences of the battles and calms the population. Jin bowed and greeted the boss. Lin, at this time near the girl on the ground, was still lying in a semi-conscious state. Lin pointed her hand to the fighter and said that he could defeat Lucas. Jin asked the boss with a dissatisfied voice, "Could the guy really defeat the 5th-level criminal?" Lin pointed aside a finger at the protagonist near the hole in the wall and said that Shui helped Li Kai to defeat the bandit. Jin thanked her boss for the information. She promised to report on all associations. After consideration of the report within 3 days, the protagonist was supposed to receive compensation for damage. Jin looked on the side of the protagonist and said that this guy was not registered with the association. Lin smiled slyly and said that she would help the guy register. She thanked her subordinate for her hard work. Jin smiled at her boss. At this time, workers came up on the side and took the bandit's body on a stretcher. Workers took the body of Lucas on a stretcher. Jin thanked the protagonist for the inconvenience caused. The girl handed the girl a business card and said that she could call her if she would need help. Lin handed her hand to her business card and with a smile said so that Jin would not worry. The subordinate looked at the boss Lin and said that she agreed with her. The girl waved her hand to the guy and said that he would follow her. Sei looked at her with excitement. The main character slyly asked the girl if she would rent a room after what happened. Van answered the guy that she would still shoot. Zhui told the interlocutor that she should go and rest. A little later they will discuss the rent with her. Van answered the guy that she would leave. Lin told the main character to come to her and slammed the door behind him. Van silently looked after the main character before she left. Shu turned around and asked Lin, what did she want to discuss with him? The girl stood near the mirror. She told the guy that tomorrow she would help him register in the association. Shui will have to show the necessary documents. The main character in a dissatisfied voice told the girl that he still did not give her consent. He was unhappy that she decided everything for him. The girl turned away and reminded the guy that she had already told Jin that she would register him. If no action followed on her part, then the association will begin to look after the main character. Lin turned around and explained to the guy that Jin did not believe that he himself was able to defeat Lucas with his own hands. The main character with a sad look looked at the floor in front of him. He said that he did not want to contact the association. A girlfriend asked the guy so that he would not refuse her offer. Lin, with a smile, reminded her partner that he could have a stable income. A girlfriend cunningly looked at the guy and said that she wanted to persuade him with other methods. Sui answered the girl with displeasure that she was the head of the information department and he did not like such hints. Lin smiled cunningly to the guy and said that she was just joking. The girl smiled slyly and told the main character that she wanted to earn extra money and pay off her debts. The girlfriend persistently advised the guy so that he did not refuse to advantage the offer. Lin hugged the main character and pressed it to her. She slyly asked him, what did he want to tell her? The main character near the girl's chest in fright asked her to think over everything. Lin, with a smile, answered the main character that she gave him time until 9 in the morning. The girl left the room and slammed the door. The main character did not know what to do. Shui walked in slippers around the room. A spider appeared near his leg. The guy told himself that he wants to think about the words of the girl. The main character stepped forward and crushed a frightened spider with his foot. The spider, after the attack, was crushed. He could not move around the floor. Suddenly, the strength appeared in the legs and he began to recover. The insect recovered and the spider jumped onto the clutches. He made quiet sounds. The main character took a hole and a large stack of paper and nailed the spider to the floor. Yu sat on the floor and looked at the nailed insect with a displeased look. The guy looked at the traces of the insect on a pile of papers. He said in a dissatisfied voice that a lot of spiders divorced recently. A frightened guy in the room fell to the floor and shouted so that the woman spared him. Insects crawled to him. The stranger promised to give all the money he has. The woman held out her hand to the frightened guy and grabbed his face. She cunningly told him that she did not need money. A huge and predatory spider crushed the guy and shouted that she wanted him. The man looked as a person to the side and noticed how insects ran along him. The spider viciously demanded from the guy to fully satisfy her. The woman took off her boyfriend and shouted that they would have done a lot of small spiders together. The spider took off his clothes from the guy's body and looked at him very displeasure. The stranger looked around and said that he was afraid of pain. Around him were small spiders on the floor. The demonic woman was very angry. Her eyes shone brightly with green light. The spider was dissatisfied with her hands and told the guy that he was not suitable for anything. The man scaredly continued to shout to the woman that he would do everything he wants for her. A huge number of spiders crawled onto the guy's body, and he screamed in fright. The stranger looked in front of him. Spiders completely covered his whole body. Very quickly, predatory insects ate all the flesh of a person, and only the skeleton remained of him. The spider looked around and said that she wants to stay for a short while in this apartment. The woman ordered insects to help her change clothes. There was green smoke around her. Insects crawled through the body of a woman. They completely covered her. A huge flock of small spiders completely covered the mistress's body and ran around her on the floor. The demonic woman told herself that she could leave this appearance to herself. Small spiders ran around her. The body of the mistress became attractive. She told herself that she needed to spend poison in order to maintain this form. The spider licked her lips and ordered insects to bring her to eat for her. A huge number of spiders ran through the door at home. The mistress took off her shoes and sat on the floor. The spider joyfully told herself that she could now have a little rest. The girl heard a message on the phone that the city was filled with tarantulas. Citizens were asked to be careful and close the windows and doors. The main character stood near a huge hole in the wall and tried to seal it. He turned around and asked the girl, "Why is she looking at him?" Lynn held the phone in her hands. She told a friend that this news was somehow strange. The main character stood near the hole in the wall. He said that there is nothing strange in the settlement of spiders. The guy turned around and reminded the girl that she had to work today. He asked why she still did not change clothes. Lynn told the guy that the association gave her a day off. The organization found out that it rents housing with him. The girl grabbed the protagonist by the hand and asked if he wanted to join the association. Lynn came close to the guy and touched him with her chest. Suddenly, the guy and the girl were very scared. They heard someone called to the rescue from the side. Lynn, along with the main character, turned around and asked the girl, "What happened?" Van, very frightened on the go, opened the door and ran into the room. The girl ran into the room and screamed that there were a lot of spiders around her. The main character, along with a girlfriend, looked at her with surprise. Van ran in slippers and asked to be helped. A lot of insects fled behind her on the floor. Lynn began to viciously crush insects with his foot. The frightened Van jumped onto the sofa. The girl viciously turned around and asked the protagonist to come up and help her. Sui stood very bewildered and frightened. He raised his hand in front of him. Lin, in a dissatisfied voice, told his friend that he was afraid of spiders. Shui was even more scared. He silently looked at the girl and did not know what to tell her. Lin continued to crush insects. She told the guy to help her. She herself could not cope. The guy ran to the side of the girl and said that she would leave a little. The girlfriend turned around and asked the protagonist, what did he want to do? A bright fire appeared in the guy's hand. He prepared with his help to attack insects. The main character launched the fire from his hand. A large burning monster flew in the room. The fire scattered around the room, and a bright explosion rang out. Lin was very scared. Lin looked in front of her. She did not understand what was happening. The main character put his hand to his chest and told the girls that the spiders were his worst enemies. Lin was very surprised when she realized that her friend owns the magic of fire. Bai reminded his girlfriend that she was reading his thoughts. He told her that she might guess. Lin viciously demanded that the main character also did not dare to climb into her thoughts. The girl, very displeasure, mentally said to the guy that he was a villain. The protagonist held the phone in his hands. He told the girls that he needs to leave, and they can do cleaning at home. Van looked at the guy with great excitement. She did not know what to tell him. Lin viciously told the main character that today all public institutions are closed and he did not need to go anywhere. The main character was very scared. He realized that he was left without work. Lin showed the guy the phone. She said that he could read everything on the internet. The establishment's closed because of the spiders. Xue read the message on the phone. The culprits of many deaths were called small spiders. The main character carefully looked at the phone. He continued to read news about spiders. Hui, in a proud voice, told his friends that he did not want to die in this life from a spider bite. The mistress sat in the building and sneezed loudly. She decided that someone scolds her behind her. The spider looked in front of her and took out a small scarf to wipe her face. Suddenly, a girl with 2 pistols jumped into a broken window. Hu Xin was the secretary of the head of the combat unit with the 4th level. She shouted to Pauchika that she came to arrest her on behalf of the association. The spider on the couch said viciously that she did not expect that the association agents would find her location so quickly. The lady angrily asked Xin, did she really decide that she could lay down a weapon? Xin glanced angrily at the spider and shouted that this is what she wanted. The spider stood on her feet. She looked at the girl and said that she was disarmed. Suddenly, a lot of insects appeared on the mistress's body. Her body was green. Sun held out the weapon forward and viciously asked the spider, what was she doing? The lady told the girl that her insects are her weapons, whom she loves very much. Sun said to Madam in vicious voice that she refuses to cooperate. She threatened her to shoot her in place. The bullet flew and struck the body of the spider. Sun joyfully looked at the woman's body pierced through and said that she had hit the apple. The spiders very quickly spread over the lady's body and began to treat her wound in her chest. The insect was very quickly able to heal the hole in the woman's body. It became smaller. Sun held a gun in her hand and looked very viciously at the spider. Madam viciously told the girl that she will now show her real abilities. Sun will die after that. Van scaredly asked the protagonist, what should she do now? The two of them stood near the knocked-out door. Shui answered the girl with displeasure that the screws were overlooking the door from behind the incident yesterday. He demanded that Lin also look at his room. He promised to fix it if something broke. The main character called the girl. Lin answered someone on the phone that she would come soon. The girl told a friend that she was called from the association and asked to come urgently. Shu asked her girlfriend, was she really not a day off? The girl told the main character that she would find a way to pay for repairs. They can talk about everything else in the evening. Lin left the house through a hole in the wall. Van said with surprise that the girl looked excited. Shui explained to the interlocutor that all this is connected with the invasion of spiders. He invited his girlfriend to close a hole in the wall. The main character scaredly shouted to the girl that a spider appeared next to her. Van rushed to the guy and hugged him. She asked with fright, "Where is the spider?" Shu with excitement noted to himself that the girl's body is very soft. The guy raised his shoes, and under it lay a crushed insect. He told his girlfriend that he crushed a spider. Van smiled at the main character and invited him to quickly lock a hole in the wall. Shu looked at the girl in bewilderment and asked what hole she talked about. Van pointed her hand to the hole in the wall and explained that she spoke about this hole. The girl arrived at the association office. An employee with a folder behind her ran up to her and said that he wants to share information with her from the combat department. Lin asked the subordinate how the secretary of the fairies feels. The guy answered the boss with excitement that the head of the department of Xiao had managed on time and saved the secretary Fei. The girl received a serious injury and was taken to the hospital. Her life is already out of danger. Lin looked at the documents. She asked the subordinate if Ihun's criminal was caught. A subordinate near the elevator shouted to the boss that the criminal escaped. She was seriously wounded by the head of the department. She could go somewhere hibernation. She is looking for a combat department. Lin told the subordinate that information about Ijun would be transferred to the military in the near future. The guy answered the boss that he understood everything. The girl stood near the door. She could not understand why Fei lost to the woman spider. The elevator door opened and Jin was inside. She silently looked at the boss. The employee was holding a folder with documents. She greeted Lin. Lin looked at the subordinate and said that she helped her with something. The main character walked along the street. There were many people around. A few days later, all enterprises and institutions opened in the city. Wei sat on his moped. He thought that the catastrophe with spiders was only worse. The main character looked carefully and noticed how a small spider sat on his moped. Shui angry thought that if the spiders would not get away right now, then he would burn them all. The angry main character raised his hand and prepared to throw the insect to the side. The main character swung his hand and threw the spider far aside. Shui went to the door of the client and knocked. He said that he brought delivery. The door opened, and a thick client with glasses came out of it. He took the food from the guy. The client turned and went into the apartment. He slammed the door in front of him. The main character displeasedly stepped aside along the corridor. He heard the sound from the phone. The main character took the phone and began to read messages. The client wrote that he found a spider in his food. He put 4 stars to the deliverer. The main character was delighted due to the fact that the buyer put 4 stars to him. As a result, his dying speed slowed down. After a small pause, Zhui told himself that he had no reason for joy. Past events destroyed his perfect plan. In the city lane near the garbage tanks, there were a lot of rats. Insects surrounded the frightened rodent. The rat screamed loudly and wanted to escape. The beaten spider shouted displeasedly that she was very painful because of the association. The woman was sitting on the floor in the lane. She viciously said that she would not forgive the association. The spider looked angrily at the insects and said that they would give her the blood that they sucked. The woman's eyes brightly lit up. She shouted so that the spiders would be filled. Gradually, the woman's body began to recover. She said in a dissatisfied voice that this blood would not be enough. The spider looked aside and said that she needed to find a man and completely suck his blood. A huge spider began to go along the lane. Insects ran from below. The main character was sitting near a moped. He said in a dissatisfied voice that his transport had completely broken. The main character looked at the moped and told himself that he would need to spend money. Suddenly, the guy heard a very suspicious noise on the side. Someone got to him. The main character saw how a huge paw of spider appeared on the side in the side of the lane. The guy turned around and looked in surprise at the spider. The woman studied his gaze displeasedly. The guy was very surprised when he saw a big spider with a human body. The spider looked angrily at the guy and said that he was skinny, but he would succeed. A demonic woman with burning eyes rushed at the guy and shouted to please her. A young monk named Shui went to the pilgrimage to India for sacred manuscripts. Women spiders caught him and tied him in the cave. A tied monk prayed to his deity. Opposite him were predatory women. Sui told women to stop spinning and stand on the true path. He invited them to turn into parishioners of the Buddhist temple. One of the women asked the monk whether it was written in his sacred texts that he could stay and play with them. Demonic women loudly and viciously began to scream the monk so that he remained and play with them. One of them promised the guy to fulfill all his desires. Shui looked at the women and thanked them for the invitation. He explained that he was not interested in anything. One of the demons ran to the monk and said that they could not let him go. The woman touched her body with her hand and demanded from the guy to help them with something. Iju did not give in to seduction of the spider. He sat at the machine and spun the web. One of the women told the guy that he used to make cotton fabric. Various demons and perfumes that inhabit this world are looking for people who can work with their hands. This can help find a chance of salvation. The monk brought a piece of silk to a woman and said that the fabric was already ready. Demonic women smiled cheerfully and shouted to the guy that they were very happy. Suddenly, lightning struck from the sky from above and struck the monarch to death. The monk Shu died after he created the most beautiful silk fabric in the world. The main character in the lane scaredly called the spider. The woman told the guy that he himself was to blame for he met her. The man asked the demoness, is it really her fault in the catastrophe with spiders? The spider answered the man that she had eaten only scumbags. She asked her partner if he had any last words. The spider looked at the protagonist and said that he looks very thin. She decided that the sacrifice would come down to her. The main character sternly answered the woman that he had no last words. The demoness slyly looked at the guy and said that she wants love from him before death. Shui replied to her that he did not agree. The spider pointed to the guy with her hand and said that her poison could cause hallucinations. The protagonist will not have more before his death. The demonic woman sharply jumped above the ground and prepared to attack the guy. The protagonist decided to evade the opponent's attack and sharply disappeared from the place. The spider was very surprised at his disappearance. The demoness carefully looked around and could not understand where the guy disappeared. The woman turned to the side and with fright noticed how the guy was behind her. Shui looked at the woman and asked if she was singing threads. The spider looked angrily at the guy and asked, was he really interested in perversion? The main character extended his hand forward and grabbed it with a spider by the hand. With all his might, a man grabbed a woman with his hands and hit her on the ground on a grand scale. Sui knocked in a spider in all directions on the ground. He demanded that she spun the thread. The main character demanded an unconscious spider from the body to spin. Then she will not be offended to die. The main character calmly went along the evening street. Next to him on the ground lay the body of an unconscious demonic woman. Suddenly the guy tripped over the lying jar on the ground and began to fall. The main character is very angry. He realized that the pawis were bent with this fabric. After that, the guy swung to hit the jar with all his might. Sui calmly walked along the lane. A fighter suddenly appeared behind him. Liu grabbed the phone and scaredly told his partner that Aijuna was defeated. Late in the evening, the main character was at home with a girlfriend. Lin ran into the room. She joyfully and with a smile shouted to her friends that she was returning. Yu sat with his girlfriend on the couch. Van asked the guest, did she really work for 2 days in the association? Lin from the threshold shouted to her friends that Aijuna had lost, but the demoness is still in the residential area. Wei thought to himself that he lost due to the fact that the spider reminded him of something bad. Lin looked strictly at the protagonist. She carefully studied him. Lin telepathically asked the guy, why did he not say anything about this to her before? Shui answered the interlocutor in his mind that he really could not restrain himself. The girl went to the guy and said that she registered him in the association. She brought him an envelope with a salary for victory over Lucas. The main character opened the envelope and took out the money. He told the girl that he did not want to think about it. Ixu took the money from the envelope and joyfully shouted to the girl that he was joining. Lin looked at the guy and said that the next Monday he would go to the association with her and join a new position. The main character the next day woke up at home on the bed. A sleepy guy on the bed turned to the side on the pillow and held out his hands. The main character opened one eye. Lying, he noticed that someone was next to him. Shui jumped sharply on the bed. He did not understand who was next to him there. The main character looked carefully in front of him. He realized that a person was lying in front of him under the blanket. Shui raised the blanket and looked very carefully who was lying under it. The main character saw how an unfamiliar young girl was lying under a blanket on the bed. The guy abruptly covered the stranger with a blanket. He was very worried. Sei was very scared. He could not understand where the stranger came from on his bed. The girl came to her senses. She asked the guy, "Was it already morning?" The stranger sat on the bed and pulled her eyes. She asked the protagonist, "Why did he wake up so early?" Sui sat in dismay and realized that an unfamiliar girl knew him personally. The girl wrapped her arms around the frightened guy and shouted that she wanted to eat. Shui looked at the stranger and asked who she was. The girl approached the guy and said in displeasure that he forgot her very quickly. The protagonist, trying to be calm, told the girl that she would leave home as soon as possible, and they had nothing. The stranger looked at the guy and asked, "Did he really mean everything that happened in reality?" Shui carefully looked at the stranger and asked if she had superpowers. The girl laughed. She told the main character that he is very innocent. Shui asked the interlocutor with displeasure who she is and what she is doing in his house. The stranger looked at the protagonist with a smile and said that her name is Van Ihan. The main character told the interlocutor that she is a relative of her friend Van Eyck. At this time, the girlfriend knocked her hand into the room of the protagonist and shouted to get up. Van entered the room and displeasedly noticed how the guy was sitting next to the girl. Van looked scared at her sister and asked what she was doing here. Van scaredly pointed a finger at her sister and the protagonist. Her voice trembled. Ixui explained to his girlfriend that he was not familiar with her sister at all. Ihana greeted her sister with a smile. The main character was very unpleasantly surprised when he realized that there were two sisters next to him. Yu sat at the table and there was food. He thought that the girls were not at all like each other. Ihan poked a finger at her girlfriend and said that she was growing very well. The main character was watching this from the side. The protagonist asked the bath that was really sure that her sister is next to her. The girls were not at all like. Yu sat opposite his girlfriends. He asked the baths, why did she say that she was far from sister? Van showed her hand to the side and said that her sister is the leader of their clan. She is absolutely first class. Shui looked at Ihana displeasedly. The girl did not seem first class to him. Van explained to the main character that she and her sister belong to the clan of the succubus. Her sister can change the guise at will. The main character was surprised when he heard from his girlfriend about the succubus. Initially, the demons who came to a man to seduce him in a dream. The hypnotic ability is very rare. Therefore, the clans of the succubus have become for all targets. The association for itself is happy to accept everyone with the ability of hypnosis. The girl jumped up near the table. She told the main character that she wants to establish relations with the homeowner. Ihan held out her finger to her face and very carefully touched their lips. The girl swung her finger and launched a small air kiss against the guy. Ihana jumped up cheerfully to her feet. She said that she would do something cheerful with her sister. Representatives of the Van clan for the most part are women. Therefore, they are called a clan of succubus. For many hundreds of years, women used their abilities to serve various forces. Van Ihan is the most outstanding head of the clan over the past 50 years. The protagonist looked at a girlfriend with excitement. He did not know if she had any limit of physical capabilities. Shu sat in a chair and looked at the girl in fright. She asked him why he was silent. The main character asked the interlocutor how she wanted him to react. Ihana said with a smile to the guy that because of her sister's presence, he specifically hides his feelings for her. The main character answered the interlocutor that anyone who opens their eyes and sees an unfamiliar woman next to him is banned. He did not like the big breasts of Ihan. Ihan was very angry. She looked with hatred at the protagonist and did not know what to say. Van was very unpleasantly surprised when she saw that her sister was angry. She wanted the main character to stop. The main character told the girls that his moped has broken. He needed to leave early today to fix him. He asked the girl to leave. Ihana sat on the floor on her knees. She was unhappy due to the fact that she could not seduce the protagonist. Van shouted in a frightened voice to her sister to calm down. Ihan had hypnotic skills. She could increase the human desire of the guy many times. A pink glow appeared around the girl's hand. A pink magic bow with an arrow appeared in the girl's hands. If such an arrow falls into the guy, then he will no longer be able to get out of love hallucinations. The main character did not notice how a magic arrow flew behind him. The pink arrow hit the guy in the back and pierced him from behind. Shui did not have time to figure out anything. Van looked scared at the protagonist and thought that it was all over for him. The main character turned around and asked the interlocutor, "What is she doing?" Suddenly, the guy fell into some parallel reality. He did not understand where he was. The guy saw himself in a huge environment of beautiful girls. One of them told him that she would not let him go. The girl looked at the protagonist and said that he would stay here for life. Van, in dismay, asked the guy what to do if he would remain in her sister's hallucinations for a very long time. The protagonist can lose the human appearance. Shui crouched and looked at the jar near his feet. He was surprised due to the fact that hypnosis could be developed to such a high level. He first fell into such a powerful illusion. Ihan looked in surprise at the protagonist and thought that he was very strange. The main character was not confused. He held out his hand to the girl and showed his finger up. The main character cheerfully told the girlfriend that she was well done and did a good job. Ihana shouted to the guy with a displeased voice so that he would not look down at her. Ihana extended her hand forward and demanded that the girls absorb the main character. Demonic girls stood viciously looked at the protagonist. Ihan said that in her world, fantasies the will of each participant is gradually destroying. The main character stood and watched as illusory girls approached him from all sides. Ihana looked strictly at the guy and said that he would remain here forever. The main character asked the girl, "Does she really want to break him?" The girls surrounded the protagonist and began to persistently pester him. Shui very viciously and sternly said that it is impossible to break his willpower. A bright radiance appeared around the protagonist. His body was closed by a protective cocoon. The main character stood in the center of magical reality. Demonic girls flew around him. Ihan looked in surprise at the guy. She realized that she could not break him. Shui looked at the girl flying in front of him and said that he would forgive her if he had time to deliver orders. The main character viciously warned Han about what would happen if he did not have time to deliver orders on time. The girl was very angry when she heard from the guy a word about delivery. The girl viciously rushed at the protagonist from above and shouted, so that he did not blame her for the fact that she would beat him. Ihan was very amazed at the fact that the guy could use his abilities in her illusion. The girl screamed loudly. The main character grabbed her throat with his hand. Zhui held the girl by the throat, and at that time a huge red monster appeared on the side. The protagonist shouted to the girl with an evil voice to guess. The main character held his girlfriend with his hand by the throat. Ihan angrily told the guy that no one except her could do this. The girl tried to free herself from capturing the guy's hand. She was unhappy due to the fact that he used abilities in her illusion. The main character angrily asked the girl, "Does she really want to say that he is not a man?" The main character bounced back from the girl and threw her away from him. He told her that he knows how to disperse hypnosis. Shui answered the girl in a calm voice that he can succumb to hypnosis only if he wants it himself. Ihan sat on her knees. She told the guy that the association does not know about his existence. Otherwise, he would not calmly walk the streets and did not carry orders. The girl held out her hands to the side and pink lightning appeared next to her. Ihan prepared to shoot at the protagonist from a magic bow. She strictly told him that if they had learned about him in the association, he would be closed and experiments on him would be conducted. The main character angrily asked the girl, "Does she really want to use hypnosis in her illusion again?" He threatened her that she could fall into a double illusion and could not get out. The girl prepared to shoot a guy with a magic arrow. She told him that she wants to check what she was capable of. The main character in a calm voice answered the interlocutor that he would stand here. Ihana scaredly asked the guy why did he do this. The main character answered the girl that he was giving her a chance to check what would happen to her double illusion. He was wondering what would happen at the next level. The girl launched a magical arrow into the protagonist. She shouted to him that he was looking down on other people. The arrow flew close to the guy and crashed into a small fence. Cracks appeared on the glass. Protective glass scattered into many fragments. There were no more people around. Ihan lay unconscious on the floor in a room with her eyes closed. Van ran into the room and scaredly asked her sister, "What happened to her?" Lin ran into the room and scaredly asked the girls, "What are they doing in the morning?" She explained that the door was not repaired and misses the sound. Lin crouched and looked at the unconscious stranger on the floor. Van explained to the girl that her sister was next to her. She suddenly lost consciousness. Van was scared due to the fact that her sister fainted. She did not know what to do. Lin measured the pulse of the girl and said that everything should go through. She needed to lie down a little. Lin asked the girl, why was her sister in the main character's room? The girl was unhappy with the protagonist. Why did Ihan fainted in his room? Shui thought and was frightened. He did not know what to answer the girl now. Lin swung her foot and hit the guy. She demanded an immediate answer from him. The main character lay unconscious on the floor. The girl scaredly said that the guy became very bad. Van explained to the interlocutor with the excitement that the main character is inside her sister's illusion. Lin, with great excitement, looked at the girls with the surname Van and realized that they were two sisters. Lin asked the interlocutor, "Is her sister named Ihan the head of the Van clan?" Van, with a sad voice, confirmed the interlocutor that Ihana is her sister. Lin told the girl with excitement that they should come to the association. Van scaredly asked the interlocutor about coming to the association. Lin strictly told the girl that her sister is not only the head of the clan, but also one of the mortal sins. Ihan is lust. Van could not believe that her sister could join such an ominous organization. Lin explained to the girl that her intelligence department wants to invite them to talk. After communication, they will be released. Van looked with excitement at Ihana and said that her sister is now unconscious. Lin extended her hand forward and activated reading thoughts and the surveillance mode. Using this regime, it was possible to get into the opponent's subconscious and find out his secrets. Lin touched her fingers to the head of an unconscious girl. Frightened Lin looked in front of her. She did not understand how this could happen. Van asked her girlfriend in dismay and carefully, how did she feel? Lin looked with excitement at the unconscious girl on the floor and said that she sees nothing and everything in the darkness. The girl was in a second-level illusion. She lay unconscious in the dark room. Ihan opened her eyes and came to her senses. She saw that she was in bottomless darkness. The girl looked around and was looking for the protagonist. She remembered that she pulled him behind her. Suddenly, Ihana hit her head. She did not understand what this happened. The girl looked up in surprise and noticed how she was a huge statue in front of her. Ihana looked in surprise at a huge stone monument from above. Above the girl's head was a huge stone monument in the form of the protagonist. Suddenly, the eyes at the monument lit up. He looked viciously at the girl. The statue looked angrily at the girl with burning bright red eyes. Ihan was very unpleasantly surprised. She did not understand why the guy was the master in her illusion. The monument angrily looked at the girl. She felt that the overwhelming energy of the statue suffocates her. The wooden monument raised his hand and pointed toward his finger. Ihan stood at his feet. The statue showed her finger strictly to the side. The girl continued to stand from below. The monument angrily asked the girl if she wants to know who he was. Ihan was very scared and became worried. She looked in front of her. The girl's body flew in dimension. There were bright windows around her. The monument asked her if she wants to know who he was. Ihan was very amazed. She did not understand what it was before her. The girl saw various episodes from the life of the protagonist, how he died from a pistol and poisoning. Ihan saw the protagonist in a knight's costume. A lot of arrows fell into it from behind. The main character stood near the tree in the evening. An apple fell on his head and he was struck by lightning. The main character lay unconscious on the table near the computer screen. Ihana looked silently in front of her. She carefully studied the story of the protagonist. Sui on the side told the girl that he himself did not know who he really was. Ihan turned around and looked very displeased at the protagonist. Shu proudly told the girl that he knows that he himself is all around him. The main character dreamily told the interlocutor that he was in an endless circle of reincarnations. He died, and inconsolably grieves. Aiju turned around and told the girl that he himself did not know how he controls her illusion. The girl scaredly closed her eyes and told the guy that she did not see anything at all. Ihan with excitement thought that she would lose to the main character. He has a very strange power. The main character asked the interlocutor to kill her. The girl closed her eyes in fright. She said that she has no chance to win in such a situation. The main character stood his back near the statue. He was surprised due to the fact that in the illusion of a second-level girl there is his monument. Ihan in a displeased voice shouted to the guy that she was bored and she wants to return home. The girl angrily thought that she would sell the protagonist of the association after they would get out of here. Sui explained to the interlocutor that she would not remember anything after they get out of here. A bright pink glow appeared near the girl's hand. She told the guy that it could happen that they will lose their minds in this place. The girl in a pink radiance abruptly broke off and ran forward. She told the guy that she would imagine that the illusion was completed and they will be able to get out at any time. Ihana swung with her hand and hit the void with all her might. The girl waved her hand and did not understand why all this did not work. Sui stood next to the girl's back and asked if she needed his help. Ihana bowed over the ground and rested her hands on the floor. She swung her hand with a pink radiance. The girl with all her might swung her hand with a pink radiance. Ihan is exhausted, sat down on the ground. She thought that all this happened due to what the guy said at the very beginning. The main character sharply swung his foot and prepared to hit her. Sui with all his might hit his foot and broke a huge glass. Van through the broken glass frightened her sister and screamed to wake up. The main character stood next to Ihan. They silently looked through the broken glass. Sui joyfully looked in front of him and reminded the girl that he said that he would return. The main character sharply opened his eyes and came to his senses. He looked piercingly in front of him. Sui touched his hand and looked at the girl and asked displeasedly, "Did she really do it?" Lin displeasedly told the guy that she tried to shout at him half a day, and everything was to no avail. Sui kept his own hands by his nose. He told the girls displeased that he would require compensation. Lin displeasedly explained to the guy that thanks to her, he was able to get out of the illusion. Van looked at the protagonist very slyly and winked at him with an eye. Van looked at her sister and asked how she feels. Ihan in a weak voice answered her sister that she was dizzy. Ihana could not remember anything. She did not know what happened after they were at the second level of illusion. Lin came up and told the girl in a strict voice that she should follow her in the association. Van asked the interlocutor with a displeased voice, why should she go to her association? Lin told the girl that she suspects that she was associated with one criminal organization. She demanded that Ihan have a cooperation until the circumstances are clarified. Ihan was very surprised when she heard words about clarifying circumstances. Lin was worried. She looked at the girl and decided not to say anything else. Lin promised the interlocutor that they would continue the conversation after she returned due to the association. Van turned to the side and told the interlocutor that she would wait for her return. Van slyly told the girl that both of them have abilities that are associated with reading thoughts. She asked Ding not even tried to find out all her secrets. Lin was worried. She did not understand where the interlocutor found out what her abilities had. Ihana went to her sister and told her that they needed to leave now. Van answered her sister with a dissatisfied voice that she did not want to leave with her. Ihana looked at her sister displeasedly and said that she wanted to disobey her. Van looked at Van with a frightened voice and answered her that she had never dared to disobey her. Ihana shouted to her sister in a dissatisfied voice so that she would not stand, but followed her. The main character ran to the girls and shouted in fright to wait. Ihana turned to the guy displeasedly and asked what he still wants. The main character answered the girl that he would follow her intently. The guy reminded the interlocutor that her sister did not pay him money for rent. Ihana answered the guy that her sisters had nothing to do with her. She came here to only return Van home. The guest bowed to the main character and said that at first she would deal with family affairs. Then she will return here. The protagonist said nothing and did not answer the girl. He looked after her. Sui looked very carefully how both girls went out the door. Lin came up on the side and told the main character that the sisters were somehow strange. Their behavior is not like nursing. The main character suddenly shouted very loudly. Lin next to him was very scared. Sui in a frightened voice asked his girlfriend, "How much time is it now?" Lin looked at the watch on the wall and told the guy that now half of the 10th. The main character fell to the ground. He said in a tragic voice that he did not have time to fix the moped. The main character in a dissatisfied voice told the girl that he was in trouble after he met her. On the street near the house there was a group of people. The sisters of Van were prepared to go out. A group of guards in suits and dark glasses stood near the exit and waited for girls. Ihan told her sister to follow her. They followed a black car near the entrance. The guards in suits and glasses together greeted the mistress. Van turned around displeasedly. She did not understand why there was so much guard around. Ihan sat on the rear chair of the car. She shouted to her sister to get to her as soon as possible. The main character went to the balcony. He noticed how the black car drove away from the building. The guy stood on the balcony and carefully watched what was happening on the street. Several guards were still on the sidewalk. The girl went behind the guy and laid her hands on her shoulder. She told him with surprise that Ihana turned out to be the second lady of the Van family. Lin looked at the guy and said that he was now working for an association. He could now not continue to deliver orders. Yu stood and looked silently in front of him. The girl poked his finger from the side. The main character shouted loudly that he now did not need to work in delivery. The girl was sitting at the mirror at home. The maid combed her hair. Van answered her elderly nanny with a frightened voice that she did not want to marry. The maid straightened her hair on the girl's head and said that they found a good groom for her. She should not refuse. Van was unhappy. She did not know what to answer the maid to her words. The nanny continued to straighten her hair on the girl's head. The maid hugged a sad girl and said that all this is her duty. A man came up from the side. He asked the mistress, "Is she ready?" Van stood in an embrace with a servant. Van looked aside and said in a sad voice that the head of the clan and the guests had already arrived. The man and the girl headed for the exit. The maid remained in the room. The servant regretted the girl with a frightened voice. Van was very surprised when she heard this. The man looked at the girl and said that the wedding date was already scheduled. Everything will take place at the end of the month. The girl asked the man displeasedly, would everything take place so quickly? The servant told the girl that the wedding date would not change if there are no surprises. Van stepped and abruptly went into the next room. Her sister was sitting there. Ihan sat in a chair with an apple in his hand. A young guy was sitting next to her in a chair. A girl with an apple slyly said that it could always be so, that something unforeseen will happen. The guy with glasses patted his hands and said that all this is not bad. The guest went to the girl and carefully examined her from all sides. The guy with glasses carefully studied his future bride. The girl stood silently. The stranger joyfully said that Van would be able to give birth to healthy children. Ihan in a joyful voice shouted to the guy that the Uyan family still believes in this. The frightened Van grabbed the edges of her clothes. She looked in front of her with a piercing look. The guy said with a smile that the Uyan family now needs to think about future generations. They have only one heir. Ihan jumped from her seat. The groom joyfully told the girl that he was waiting for a wedding at the end of the month. Ihan held out a hand to the guy and wished him a smile of good cooperation. The contented future groom held out his hand to the girl and shook her back. Van told her sister with a frightened voice that she wanted to move away and relax. Ihan in a calm voice answered her sister that she could leave. Van went away and headed for the door. Ihana explained to the guy that her sister has not striking since childhood. He should not pay attention to this. Ihana said cunningly to the future groom that after the wedding she would discuss the conditions for cooperation between their families. The guy replied that his master was looking forward to this. Van sadly thought that since childhood, no one had ever cared about her feelings. The girl sat near a small pond and looked sadly at it. She thought that she was always only an instrument in the hands of the Van family. She had no right to even complain. The silent girl sat and looked very sadly with tears into the water. Van put her hands to face. She felt that she had tears. Yuzui came up behind and turned to the girl. He told her in a calm voice that cosmetics flowed on her face. Very sad, Van frightenedly touched her face with her hand. The girl turned around and asked the protagonist, "Where did he come from here?" Shui pointed his finger to the side and explained to the interlocutor that he went through the gate. The girlfriend was surprised that the guy was not detained at the entrance. The protagonist explained to the interlocutor that he called himself a courier and was let him in. The girl was very amazed when she heard such words from the protagonist. The girl in the building of the estate shouted to the guy that he should not stay here. Van ran away and pulled her friend by the hand. She shouted that if a sister finds out about his presence, then he would be very bad. The girl told a friend that she would spend it to the rear gate. She asked him to not come to her anymore and would not look for her. Shu asked his girlfriend why did she cry. The girl turned to the main character and wanted to tell him the reason for her tears. The girl and a friend ran to the corner of the building. They decided that someone was there. The girl and the guy stopped. They realized that there was someone next to them. The man slowly stepped from the side of the corner of the building. It was a servant. The servant looked at the girl and asked who was standing next to her now. The girl scaredly asked Uncle Zuya, "Why is he here?" The man answered the lady that he was going to water the flowers in the garden. The man looked carefully and noticed how the girl was holding the protagonist's hand. Shui asked strictly with the mistress, "Really, does she not want to marry from her friend?" Van stood and held the hand of the protagonist. The man strictly pointed a finger at them. Suddenly, the girl tore off her hand from the guy and told the servant that she had nothing with Sayub. The man looked at the protagonist and said thoughtfully that this guy is a courier. Suddenly, some guest came to the servant, and he joyfully shouted that he understood. Van was very scared behind him. Zui told a tragic voice the story of unhappy love between a rich girl and an ordinary courier. Van answered uncle in a displeased voice that everything happened not at all. The main character grabbed his girlfriend by the hand and answered the man that everything was so. Shui looked at the man and asked him in a tragic voice so that he helped two lovers. Sui scaredly put his hand on his face. He did not know what to answer the guy with the girl. The man looked displeased at young people and said that he did not want to help them. Both hands of services lit up with fire. He said that if someone can help poor lovers so easily, then it will not be a good, tragic story. Van shouted to the servant that the guy was her lesser. Nothing else binds them. Shu, with burning hands in a strict voice, told the madam that he wants to help her understand the true feelings of the guy. The main character told the man that he himself is a regular courier, and they did not need to fight. The servant sternly told the guy that an ordinary courier would not have come here to visit. The guy answered the man that he had applied a trick to come here, but he just wanted to see the baths. The man swung and launched a huge bunch of fire against the protagonist. A bright flash faced the main character. He managed to evade it to the side. The man was scared. He realized that the main character disappeared very quickly. The guy suddenly rushed behind the man and twisted his hands behind him. The servant lay on the ground. He could not understand when the guy managed to attack him from behind. Hands behind the man lit up with bright fire. He decided to try to get out. The servant jumped to his feet, and behind him there was a bright fire explosion. The main character appeared from the side. He managed to evade the fiery explosion. The guy carefully looked at the servant and asked him to listen to him. The main character explained to the man that the girl was crying due to the fact that in their family it was not customary to hear and take care of each other. The man asked the guy, what kind of family would he be? The main character replied that he was alone all over the world. The main character answered the man with a dissatisfied voice that he was just an ordinary courier. The servant decided not to give up. He prepared to attack the guy with a new spell. The servant used a skill against the protagonist called a raging flame. There was fire near his hands. The man realized that his opponent is a very high level. He has not used such techniques against anyone for a long time. The main character calmly answered the opponent so that he would not use such techniques against him. He did not want to fight him. The man looked at the guy and was surprised to realize that he could predict his actions. The main character turned around and answered the servant that he could hear his thoughts. But he himself is not a psychic. The man got angry. He could not believe that the guy hears thoughts, but is not a psychic. Suddenly, the servant felt something from behind. He was very surprised. The servant turned sharply and looked with excitement at his mistress. The girl extended her hand to the servant and asked for forgiveness. The man fell unconscious to the ground. The main character looked at everything that was happening and thought that all this was an unexpected turn. The girl pulled an unconscious man with all her strength with her hands. She shouted to the main character that with the help of hypnosis, she caused a fainting from the servant. The guy can use the opportunity and leave their house through the rear gates. The girlfriend held her hands on the servant's body. She told the guy to go straight and find a way out. Shui looked at his girlfriend and asked if she would go with him. The girl threw the man's body into the bushes. She turned to the main character. Van answered the guy with a dissatisfied voice that she was getting married the next month. The main character answered the girl that he would not return her money to rent a house. The girl sadly sprinkled the body of a man with green flowers. She told the main character that the money did not need to be returned. She herself broke the contract. Van cried. The main character called a girlfriend to go with him. The girl answered the guy that he did not have to help her. The main character looked at the girl with a long gaze. He did not tell her anything. Shu turned around and went aside. He told the girl that he would leave. Lin ran up from the side. She shouted to the main character to stop. Lin, after the jump, landed to the ground. She viciously turned to the main character. A girlfriend grabbed the guy by the clothes and asked what he decided to just take and leave. Lin asked the protagonist, why did he look for her for half a day and dragged her here? The protagonist talked with the girl telepathically. He wanted her to be silent. Lin threatened the guy that she would report him to the association. The girl threatened the guy that in the association they cut him into pieces. Van was very surprised when she realized that the guy and the girl had come to this place because of her. The main character continued to viciously quarrel with his girlfriend. Akshu put his hand on his head and thought that in this life he would die because of this girl. The main character sat on the ground. He said that if Van does not want to marry, then she can inform him about it. The girlfriend thought deeply. She did not know what to answer the main character. The main character strictly reminded the girl that he could help her if she tells him about it. Van looked sad at the guy. She did not know if she could trust him. The girl cried piercingly that she did not want to get married and did not want to be someone else's thing. Van looked fearfully at the protagonist and asked him to take her from here. Zhui covered the girl's face with his hand and said she would not scream. The protagonist felt that as if he was satisfied with the coup with his girlfriend, he told the girl that she scared him to death. Van answered the guy that her reaction was very emotional. Lin came up and cunningly told the girl that if Van refuses to rent an apartment with them, she herself would not live with the main character. Lin extended her girlfriend's hand. Van silently looked at the girl's hand. Van put her hand on her girlfriend's hand and thanked her to herself. Van asked her friends, what should she do now? The main character with a smile answered the girl that he did not know. Lin looked cunningly at the guy and asked, did he really not come up with a plan before coming here? The protagonist turned away and said that he just wanted to make sure of the safety of the bath. The girl rented an apartment. Lin shouted at the guy, displeased from the side. The main character looked at the girl and said she followed him. If Ihan will look for her, then she first meet with him. Van sadly asked the guy what would happen to her family. The main character reminded the girl that her family members forced her to do what she did not want. Van looked scared in front of her. She thought about her family members. Lin hugged her girlfriend and said that they would solve problems as they arrive. The main character, along with the girlfriends, moved aside. Lin told friends that they could go to the cafe on East Street. She wanted to eat something tasty. The servant in a heap of green leaves suddenly came to his senses and extended his hand. The man put his hand to his head. He felt very sad, and he had tears in his eyes. The servant held out his hand in his pocket and took a small scarf to wipe his face. The man thought sadly to himself that time was going very quickly, and his mistress finally had friends. The servant entered the house and informed the mistress that their subordinates showed incompetence and could not stop the mistress of the second daughter. Van escaped with friends. Ihan sat at the table. She told the man that she was struck by his incompetence. The man, in a very frightened voice, asked for forgiveness from the girl. Ihana looked at the servant and said that she was joking and he had nothing to worry about. The servant promised to return the young Madame Ike with an exciting voice. The girl, sitting at the table, told the man that there was no need to worry, and they still have a lot of time. The man asked the lady, would she really allow her sister to live outside the house? Ihan held out her hand to food on the table. She told the man that she wants to see if her sister really wants this, or is it just conversations? The girl bit off a piece of apple and said that the bath from childhood looked detached. She just sailed with the flow. Ahana remembered how she stood in a parallel reality near the main character. She decided that Shui is really a strange type. The girl turned around and looked at the servant. She told him that he could go. The servant dutifully answered the mistress that he would do everything as she would order. The man went to the door and opened it to get out of the room. The girl silently took the banana from the table in her hand. She looked piercingly in front of her. Ihan threw up a banana with her hand up for a guy who approached her on the balcony. A fat stranger with a great appetite was eaten by a banana, who was thrown to him by the mistress. The mistress looked at the guy Gulu and told him in a displeased voice that there was no news from him for a long time. Gulu stood on the balcony and looked from a height at the girl below in the room. Suddenly, a fat fighter jumped from the balcony into the room to the mistress. Jiyu was at the 5th level and had the ability of gluttony. The fighter grabbed an apple and bit off half of him. He told the girl that Mr. Qianxun asked to find out why she was not at the last meeting. Ihana told the partner that if Chiang needs something from her, then he could write to her. Jiyu sat on a chair. He crookedly looked at the girl and told her that Mr. Qian prefers traditional methods of communication, although he knows how to use social networks. The fighter was surprised due to the fact that the succubus family was afraid of society. Dissatisfied, Ihan strictly demanded from the fighter to stop eating. Jiyu crookedly looked at the girl with burning eyes and asked, did she really consider him fat? Ihan told the guy a dissatisfied voice that she does not like when someone was talking with her mouth full. Jiyu explained to the interlocutor that if he does not eat, then he will be very angry. When he got angry, he will do bad things. The lady looked at the fighter in a chair and asked what he still wanted to say. Jiyu informed the girl that Mr. Qian was interested in the well-being of the Van and Uyan family marriage. The hostess calmly answered the fighter that negotiations were successful. Jiyu looked strictly at the girl and said that the Uyan family is very respected. Ihan should make sure that everything will pass successfully. The hostess told the guy that if he did not want to say anything else, then he can go. She asked the fighter to warn her in advance about the visit. The fat man got up from the chair and prepared to leave. He turned around and looked at the table with food. Jiyu extended his finger to the side and pointed them to a dish with fruits. He wanted to take them to himself. The girl told the fighter that he could take food. Guy joyfully held out his hands to the fruit. Ihan got up from her seat and asked the guy if he was not afraid that someone would see him. Gu answered the interlocutor that no one would see him. The fighter began to consume an apple with appetite. He said that someone could really notice him. Gu viciously told the girl that he would force such a person to disappear. The guy stood on the door. He waved his hand to the girl and shouted that Mr. Qian was expecting good news from her. Ihana fell on the table and wrapped her arms around her head. She shouted that she was in the problem. The main character was at home in the apartment with his girlfriends. Wang, frightened, sat on the couch. She told Lin that she did not understand anything. Lin strictly asked the interlocutor, does she really know anything about her family affairs? Van was the second young lady in the family. Van was frightened on the couch. She said that in her family she is just an outcast. The main character sat on the couch and silently looked at the girls for his part. Shui held out his hand to the remote control with the TV and wanted to turn it on. A girlfriend pulled out a remote control from the hands of the protagonist and shouted to be serious. They had to work. The protagonist threatened the interlocutor in a calm voice that she could get from him. Lin grabbed her head with her hands. She shouted that the association could lose a thread that leads to a criminal organization. The main character got to his feet. He told the girl in a strict voice that she is not as kind as he wants to seem. She had a reason to come to the rescue of IK. Before the interrogation of Ike, the girl Lin studied detailed information about the Van family. She found out that Ike was telling the truth. Lin, sitting on the couch, said that even if she dealt with his breathing, she still will have little money. In the Van family, only the older child was always revered. Other family members were brought up as servants. The girl on the couch told friends that she needs to go to the association for introductory briefing. She will stay there for 2 days. Van told her girlfriend that she wants to go to the association. She dreamed about this since childhood, but he has a low level. Lin answered the interlocutor that the association always opened the door for those who have hypnosis abilities. Van, in a modest voice, wanted to tell her partners about what her sister said. Lin told the girl that if she wants to get rid of the influence of her family, then she should speak freely about her desires and feelings. Lin, with excitement, said that the association came to the Van family with a proposal for cooperation. But all these proposals were rejected. Van was very surprised when she heard such words from a girlfriend. She remembered that her sister told her displeased that she had only a 3rd level of abilities. No one will take her seriously. Han was sitting at a computer game. She told her sister to just stay at home and fulfill her duties. Lin strictly demanded from the interlocutor to be more confident. Lin reminded the interlocutor that she was able to deal with the manager from her house. Van began to remember in dismay. Van looked at her hands in dismay. She could not believe that she really did it. Ike remembered that from childhood she was in the shadow and her sister, Han, was a beloved daughter in the family. Van felt very sad. She wanted to tell her friend something to herself. The main character laid his hand on his girlfriend's shoulder and said that sometimes, the stronger the ability, the more troubles. Lin looked at the girl with a studying gaze. She thought for a long time. A girlfriend with a smile asked Ike if she really wants to join an association. Van looked with excitement at her girlfriend and shouted that she wanted to be a member of the association. Lin slyly answered the interlocutor that she had one way. The main character from behind said in displeasure that if a girl smiles, then this means that she conceived something bad. Van with excitement shouted to her friends that she wants to try, and it doesn't matter how. Lin told his interlocutor the details of the entrance exams in the association. After passing all the tests, a Van can be admitted to the staff of the organization's employees. Ike with excitement asked what another test is talking about. Lin explained to the interlocutor that no one knows about this test in the outside world. She asked if she wanted to try. Van shouted with excitement to the girl that if she has at least the slightest chance, then she should use it. Lin, along with his companion, approached the large building. Van was very amazed. Lin, with a smile, greeted the girl at the headquarters of the association. Ike stood next to friends. She was surprised to look around and said that there were tall buildings around. Lin told the girl that introductory briefing lasts 3 days. Then for 3 days you need to live at the headquarters of the association. First, she will go with the main character for introductory learning. Van will wait for them in her office. Ike looked joyfully at the girl and said that she agreed. Lin asked his friend, did he remember her words? Shui answered the interlocutor that he remembered everything. The main character, along with his 2 girlfriends, stood near the entrance to the building. Lin warned the guy that if he works in association, then he can use only one ability. Otherwise, it will begin to carefully study and experience it. The main character went through open doors to the building. Suddenly there was a strong explosion. 2 scientists stood frightened in the center of the hall. One man said that the counter jumped very high. Another employee did not understand why the counter exploded. The main character stood with his girlfriend. Lin looked in surprise in front of her and did not understand what was happening. Around the girls there were bright and powerful explosions. The video cameras exploded. Lin with displeasure with a finger at the protagonist and told telepathically that all this happened because of him. A girlfriend viciously demanded to himself with a guy to hide his abilities. Shui answered the girl telepathically that the meter was very fragile. Lin looked from the side at the protagonist and explained to him mentally that they would soon be detected. As a result, they will attract undesirable attention. Shui thought displeasedly to himself that he would need to use special things. The main character extended his hand in his pocket to get something for himself. The guy stuck 2 small metal arrows in his head. He asked the girl if he looked like. Lin looked at the protagonist and asked with surprise, "What is it?" The guy told the girl that in one of the anime he saw that you could hide his abilities if you use the antennas. The main character turned away with his back to the surprised girl and began to continue to change his appearance. The main character was in green glasses and in a pink hairstyle. He asked the girl, "Is he like that more?" The angry Lin swung with all her strength and hit the protagonist on the head. The main character was with a girl in the building. He told her in a dissatisfied voice that she did not warn him that the tester of abilities could be destroyed if he was next to him. Shui specially spent time to make a superior abilities. The main character told the girl that he specially brought the device here just in case. But he himself is not very good in creating intelligence management tools. The guy in a dissatisfied voice told the girl that the muffler can be used for a maximum of 5 minutes. Lin grabbed the guy's hand by the clothes and strictly asked, "Why did he not say this before?" The girlfriend pulled the surprised protagonist aside and said that he would go with her. Van saw running friends and shouted to wait for her. The main character, along with a girlfriend, climbed the elevator around the building. Lin pulled him along the corridor. She screamed to the workers to miss her. She had an important matter. Association employees were surprised around. Sui suddenly stumbled upon a little boy at full speed. The child looked at the girl with surprise and attention and called her by name. Lin ran along the corridor and shouted in a dissatisfied voice that she could not push through. The child looked at the guy in surprise and did not understand what kind of person it was. The girlfriend pulled the protagonist in a separate room with white furniture. She went to the door. Lin opened the door to the room and, on a grand scale, threw the main character there inside. The girl went into the room and closed the door behind her. She said in an exhausted voice that all this was dangerous. Van was sitting on the floor. She asked her friend, "Why did she run away so suddenly?" Lin stood near the wall. She looked at the protagonist and told the girl that her homeowner was a monster. Van looked displeased at the interlocutor and said that she did not understand what monster she was talking about. Lin was surprised to say that the main character is so strong that the counter of his abilities failed and exploded. Van was very surprised when she heard about the explosion of the counter. She asked with excitement, "What kind of level the guy has such?" Shui, with his back to the girls, said that he did not even bother to test his level of abilities. Van was surprised when she heard that the guy himself did not measure his level. Van told the main character that the level of people's ability is fixed after the end of the kindergarten. Wei slyly answered his girlfriend that he had passed only a year in kindergarten. Then he was kicked out of there. The guy asked his girlfriend to keep his abilities secretly. He did not want other people to know about them. Ike looked with excitement at the protagonist and promised that she would not tell anything. The girl pointed a finger at the guy's horns and asked him to show this antenna for her. Zhu broke one antenna from his head and told the girl that she could look if she wants. Lin lay on the floor. She spoke to herself and said that she wants to make money and pay debts. The main character told the girl that she speaks very loudly to herself. Van held a small metal arrow in her hands. She told the main character that he was really a genius. The girl showed the antenna the main character and told him that she would help him to make a similar muffler of abilities. Van told in detail to her friends about scientific research that the human body can produce supernatural abilities. It was revealed that such abilities are caused by DNA mutations. The girl joyfully told friends that a special snake can generate electricity of different levels. People with the help of the brain can realize computing and drive supernatural forces. Van told friends that the direction of thinking of the protagonist is completely correct. Some operations on the cerebral cortex can really suppress or enhance abilities. Lin, in a joyful voice, told her girlfriend that her family does not know how smart she is. Van was surprised when she heard such words from a girlfriend. She could not believe that it was true. The girl held a small decoration in her hands. She asked Lin, "Where is the antenna?" Van handed her girlfriend a small suspension. She said that she could redo this bracelet into a muffler of abilities. Shui asked the girl with interest, "Is she really understanding the technique?" The girl held a small bracelet in her hands. She said that the bracelet can be configured to a certain frequency of the brain of the protagonist. As a result, the decoration will slow down its abilities. Van explained that such a device can be used no more than 3 days. Lin smiled very joyfully to her girlfriend and said that there would be enough 3 days. Shu, with excitement, suggested the girl to increase her own abilities. Van answered the guy that the doctor could not do the operation to himself. The girl explained to friends that people with hypnosis can very rarely control themselves. The main character answered the girlfriend that all this is very annoying. The results of the study were published recently. Many criminals tried to hide with the help of such a suppressor. Lin sadly answered friends that all these were rumors. While there are no real things, the guy told the girl displeased that others have already done everything that was possible. Among those who tried were exactly psycho. Shui told friends that all these are equivalent modifications of the human body. People with third-level abilities can increase the level after improving the computing power of the brain. Lin explained to the guy that so far the intelligence department has not discovered any appropriate cases. But after the guy's words, she will raise this question in intelligence. Lin said Van that a girl could help the main character make a muffler. You can't postpone registration for introductory training for him. The girl was inside the room. She went to the main character. Van handed the guy a small souvenir on the suspension. She told him with a smile that the device was ready. The girl handed the main character in the hand a finished device in the form of a jewelry. Ju hung the jewelry on his hand. He asked his girlfriend, did she want to measure her own level first? Lin shouted to the main character from the side that she had already done it. She held a small apparatus in her hands. Lin said her device is a little unstable. The monitor showed that Van is at the 4th level. Van told her friends scared that she herself still does not control the frequency very well. Lin looked joyfully at her girlfriend and said that Van had already helped them a lot with something. Lin slyly thought that she could no longer worry about debts. Shui said to a mentally girlfriend so that she would not show her greedy nature. The girl shouted displeasedly to the guy that he climbed into other people's thoughts at will. Shui answered the interlocutor that he did not go into thought to anyone. Lin looked at the guy and said that she would take him to the introductory learning office. Lin prepared to go with the main character. She said that Ike waited in her office. Van goodbye waved to the main character and wished him good luck. Zhu turned around and looked at his girlfriend. She seemed very defenseless for him. The main character, along with the girl, stood near the office. Lin told the guy that an introductory learning office was located here. The main character looked in surprise in front of him. He saw how many different people stood near the office. There were many candidates near the registration points. At this time, the number 1 window temporarily stopped its work. In the corridor, Madame Van was asked to go to the 8th window. The main character asked the girl, "Is it really not an ordinary office?" Lin asked the guy what he was thinking about. Shui answered the girl that he did not think about anything. The main character laid his hand on his head and said in displeasure that he watched a lot of series. The girl indicated for the protagonist on the 5th window and told him to go there in line. Lin held a small document in her hands. She demanded that the guy behave naturally. Shui turned into it with interest. The main character stood in a crowd of people. He thought to himself about high magic. Shui looked at the man in front of him in the crowd. He remembered that before this building was the bank building. The applicant extended the document out the window. The office worker asked him whether this is a questionnaire. The employee through the glass told the applicant that his estimates are more passing for the combat department. He asked if the guy really wants to join the intelligence department. The contender in the green cloak shouted strictly to the man that he wanted to intelligence. The employee set the seal on the applicant's document. He told him to go to the 13th floor to participate in training. The guy with the direction went aside. The main character approached the window. The man through the glass told the applicant that he was recommended by the boss Lin. He asked the protagonist, why does he not want to work at full rate? Shui answered the partner through the glass that he was ready to work only for half a time. The man carefully studied the documents of the protagonist. Shu sat and waited patiently. The employee put the print on the main character's document and told Suyu to go to the 13th floor. The main character answered the man that he was. He understood to himself. He thought that the employee was very staring at him. The girl appeared on the side and waved her hand to the main character. Shui went to her. The girlfriend asked the protagonist, what was he asked about? Shui replied that the employee looked at his profile and told him about work. Shui told the girl that he would really be able to work here. Lin answered the guy with suspicion that perhaps he did not answer the way she instructed him. The protagonist told the girl that he told the employee that he would work for a part-time. Lin asked his friend, did they ask him more about something else? The protagonist confidently waved his head and answered the girl that he had not been asked about anything else. Lin with a smile told the guy that all employees of the operational logistics department seemed to be penetrating. She added that Sui can go to training. The main character asked the interlocutor, how will the training be held? Lin looked at the guy and said that training is not an indicator. Therefore, he must remain calm. The girl told the guy that there would be 2 tests for him. The first test will be very interesting. Then there will be boring combat trials. Shui told the interlocutor that listening to the words of the ruler is the same as listening to his words. The girl in surprise told the main character that he himself could not cope with the tests, and is a unique case. The girlfriend told the main character that she wants to check how Ike's things are going. He himself can climb the elevator to the desired floor. Lin waved goodbye to the chief hero with her hand and said that they would see herself in 3 days. Yue looked after the departing girl. He told himself that they really went astray. The protagonist heard someone behind him not to block the door. Someone approached him. Shui felt that someone was huge behind him. He decided to turn slowly. The main character turned around and was surprised to say that the Minotaur was standing opposite him. A tall guy with horns in displeasure asked the protagonist, did he really not hear what he was told? Zhui showed his hand to the side and said that the guy passes him. The main character looked in the back of the Minotaur. He thought to himself that in this place, you can see a lot of things. Yu stood near the elevator door. He could not believe that the Minotaur had real horns. The main character pressed the elevator button and prepared to go inside the cab. Zhui looked into the elevator and saw that there were many different passengers. Zhui went into the elevator of the elevator. One of the strangers with a mirror asked someone to press the 13th floor button. The main character approached the wall and pressed the desired button in the cab. The system told the passengers that they arrived on the desired floor and the doors were supposed to open. The protagonist, along with the rest of the companions, left the elevator cabin to the corridor. Shui, with a confident step, walked along the corridor of the 13th floor. Behind him was a stranger in a suit with a phone. The main character looked aside and called his companion, Mr. Perfection. The main character approached the cabinet at the number 1302. He stood at the door. The stranger in a suit on the side told the guy that they will be in the same group. The guy with blonde hair looked at the protagonist and greeted him. The stranger introduced himself and said that his name is Edward de Chotomat. Edward held out his hand to the main character for greeting. He possessed the 4th level, and his weapon was an elegant rapier. The main character extended his hand to his new acquaintance and called him his name. Edward held out his hand to open the door. He told the main character that they will now be in the same group and will be able to help each other. The main character told his new friend that all this is for sure. They opened the door to the room. In the room, there were people with supername. Yuan Jie had a 5th level, and he had a thunder belt. Frightened twins named Chun Hua and Chun Tian possessed the 4th level. And Chinese martial art, a guy named Van Tun, was at the 5th level, and he was a computer genius. The guests in the room turned around and greeted the protagonist together. Edward waved his hand to his new colleagues. He said that he hopes for their help in the future. The guy with a smile waved his hand to his new acquaintances and said that they could call him a sever. Yuan told the main character to take the training schedule from the table. Shui thanked him. The main character held out his hand to the table and prepared to take a stack of documents. Shui looked at the documents and carefully studied his new schedule. The main character was surprised. He realized that the schedule would be very tense for him. The document described in detail the schedule of the day for the protagonist. There was various training and analysis of the basic values of socialism. The main character remembered the words of a girlfriend. She told him that the first part of the training would be very interesting. Zhui held out his hand and put the documents on the table. The guy thought. The protagonist thought concentratedly. He did not understand what to do next. Yen, with a smile, told the main character that he had not said anything about himself yet. Shui held out his hand to his partner and said that he had previously worked as a courier. Yuan shook his hand to the main character and said that he was a student, but left himself. The protagonist realized that his partner wants to find a point of contact with him and get closer to him. Jin's woman went into the room. She told the participants that today they will have an introductory lesson before starting training. The woman carefully looked at the protagonist and realized that he was now here too. Shui looked at the worker and remembered that she had come to his house. Jin was the secretary of the head of the cleansing department. The girl told the applicants to first receive some materials. In the next month, they must fully familiarize themselves with literature. Jin clapped her hands and told the employee to bring books. The employee brought up a full cart with books in the room. The woman told the participants that they would study for 3 days. As a result, they will be able to study only multiple leadership. The books will have a complete leadership. Edward, along with 2 twins with excitement, looked at a bunch of books in front of them. Juan looked at the books with a smile and said that it would be easy for him. The participants intensified at the tables. Yuan said that everything is clear to him. Jin informed the participants that you are their group of full-time employees and freelance employees. But in general, they all work for association and society. The woman informed the applicants that after joining the association, they will no longer be tribal citizens. The main character sat and read the document carefully. The guy carefully looked at the schedule. He remembered that Lin said to him that they would not have an assessment system. The test participants were sitting at the desks. The woman told students the content of a textbook on oriented learning from the 30th chapter. Chin spoke about the fighters that they could not go to the toilet in the wrong place. The offender confiscates the instrument of crime. The protagonist thought displeasedly to himself that he had not heard exams in this office before. Shu decided to himself that his dying ability reminded himself. The woman told students that there are 5 hero headquarters all over the world. Shinya told the students that the headquarters of the heroes who is located in their city is the main headquarters in Asia. The protagonist sat at his desk with Yuan and listened carefully. The woman told students that every 5 years he has been organizing international friendly competitions. All this is a great opportunity to demonstrate force. Qin explained to the guys that the headquarters who will win in competitions will receive the right to lead the largest 5 headquarters in the world for 5 years. The woman looked cunningly at the students and said that she should no longer explain anything to them. Participants in the test carefully looked at the woman. Qin told them that they could adequately imagine their country in competitions. Xu concentration sat at the table and prepared to solve tasks. He told himself that he could not refuse to participate. The main character held a document in his hands and showed it to the girl. He told her that they will have a final exam and he could not participate in this. Lin carefully looked at the document. She was surprised due to the fact that this year they decided to add a new exam. Shui pointed his hand to the document. He reminded the girl that she was the head of the department and had to know about such changes. Qin said with a smile to the guy that she was very tired of running from the lender. As a result, she entrusted all her affairs to the secretary. She herself cannot take part in training. The girl bowed to the guy and said that she had not heard anything about the exams from the secretaries before. Shu asked the interlocutor, was she really not trained before joining the association? Lin slyly told the guy that she had the 5th level and the ability to read thoughts. Therefore, she did not go through training. The main character asked his girlfriend displeasedly when she ceases to make excuses to something else. Yu stood near the door and put his hand on the handle. He told the girl that he could not take part in the final exam. Lin with excitement called the protagonist a money tree and rushed forward to stop him. Sui shouted displeasedly to the girl to let him go. He fought off her. The girl displeasedly explained to the guy that if he leaves, then it will mean that he refused to participate in the exam. The main character was very surprised when he heard such words from a girl. The girl with excitement told the main character that every candidate, when joining the association, must undergo training. Removal is possible only in the event of a special decision. There are no other reasons for there. Lin told the guy a displeased voice that if he leaves, then she seems the first from the end who refused the exam and did not even start him. For the protagonist to be with the first end also meant death. Sui told the girl in a displeased voice that he really wanted to strangle someone. The protagonist thought that he could specially be substituted in the exam in order to get injured. After that, he may not participate further. The guy plunged deeper into his thoughts. He was worried more and more. Sui screamed very scared and loudly. He was very scared due to the fact that he might not have managed to avoid death. Jin told students that today they have the 3rd day of training. Therefore, the participants had to have a certain idea of the association and the intelligence department. After a short rest, the exam began. The twin at the table said in a dissatisfied voice that she was very tired. Repeating phrases sounded in her head. Edward answered the girl with displeasure that he also repeated the phrase in his head about the fact that you can't go to the toilet in the wrong place. Van carefully looked into the computer and said that all this was a miserable sight. Shui sat devastated at the desk. He told himself that his dying ability woke up. The woman stood behind a desk with a pointer in her hands and carefully looked at the students. Qin looked at the participants and said with a smile that they looked very tired. She asked if they were ready for the exam. Van looked up from the laptop and asked the woman, what exam awaits them? The student strictly asked the woman how connected by the acquired material with the exam. Qin smiled and straightened her glasses. She told the student that she would not comment. Wan slyly told the woman from his place that for each participant there would be a different exam. Therefore, she did not inform anyone about the testing. Qin answered the student that she approves of the course of his thoughts. As a result, she added to the participants that she could not tell them anything. The woman corrected her glasses and told the students that the exam would begin in 30 seconds. She asked if everyone was ready. The main character looked at the woman and thought displeased to himself that he was waiting for another rebirth. Qin in a loud voice told the students that they had 20 seconds left. Suddenly in the room, they sharply turned off the light. All students were very scared. The participants in dismay called the secretary Qin and asked her what happened. Suddenly, after 15 seconds, gas began to enter the room. Qin grabbed a small gas mask in her hands and told the participants that the return score was beginning. The protagonist clasped his hand with his hand and realized that they were attacked with anesthetic ether to cut down. A woman in a gas mask piercing and silently looked in front of her. Chin conducted the reverse countdown and monitored the participants. Edward, along with Van, began to lose consciousness. The main character looked around and decided that for them someone decided to arrange a quest in reality. Ji looked in front of him and decided that he was infuriated. After that, he decided to act. The main character carefully looked around and realized that he needed to hide. Jin touched the gas mask on her face and shouted to the students that the exam was starting. Yuan lay unconscious on the floor. Gradually, he began to recover and sighed. The guy opened one eye and looked aside. He did not understand why he turned off. Yuan sat on the floor. He noticed how the other participants were around him. The guy looked around in surprise and asked his friends, "Where are they?" The main character with excitement realized that the organizers used anesthesia broadcast to turn them all away and transferred to this place. The guy looked at the wall. It painted large letters between the doors. Van held out his hand to Edward and in a joyful voice told him that he had taken a laptop with him. The twin turned and viciously told the guy that he had been hooked on computer games since childhood. She threatened him to send him to the electric Buddha for therapy. A monitor lit up on the wall. An unfamiliar voice asked if his participants hear it. The main character, together with his colleagues, listened with excitement to an unfamiliar voice. Edward went to the monitor and asked the stranger, "Where are they now?" Shui realized that there were cameras around them. People on the other side of the screen saw their every movement. The stranger in the monitor smiled at the participant and said that they would be judges in their exam. The voice told excited participants that they were at the first stage of the exam for the reconnaissance department. The judge from the monitor strictly told people that the refusal to pass the exam will be considered as a refusal to join the intelligence department. The judge told the participants that they should choose one item that lies on the table in front of them before the exam. Edward viciously answered the stranger that they were never informed where they were. On a large table in front of the students lay various household items. Edward asked the judge in bewilderment, "Why is there a mustard among things?" Van reasonably said that the down jacket, all and chocolate are in the same group of things. Mustard, water, and sunscreen are in another group. Edward asked the boy, how did he understand all this? Van explained to the participant that things are sorted according to their purpose. The guy looked displeased at the boy and said that he was ready to take his word for him. Van was unhappy due to the fact that such a person as Edward decided to join the intelligence department. The guy in a romantic voice told his colleagues that the most beautiful rooms are in the intelligence departments. Yuan ran to the table and told friends that they needed to choose things for themselves. The judge carefully looked at the participants from the monitor and said that they had already decided on the choice. Each of the participants chose a specific subject for himself. Shu, for himself, picked up a warm overalls. The judge looked at the participants and said that they should be divided into groups according to the selected items. The twins were very surprised when they heard that they would need to be divided. The girl scaredly said that she would never part her sister. The judge from the monitor viciously told the participants that the exam began after the secretary Jin completed the return countdown. A table image appeared on the screen. The judge said that the exam will be divided into 2 stages. Participants will be divided into 2 groups, according to the items that they have chosen. After that, they will go to the appropriate premises. Participants considered objects in their hands with interest. The judge said that first everyone should finish the first stage with the help of the objects that they chose. Then they will come to the second stage. The team that will be the first to press the button will win. The stranger from the monitor explained to the participants that the judges would watch how everyone will show themselves and give points for this. The main condition for obtaining points is to press the button. The judge explained to the students that in the end, they would calculate the points for passing the exam, and points from the judges. A participant with the lowest number of points will receive an appropriate punishment. The participants stood and listened carefully. People with a down jacket and chocolate had to approach the door. Participants with mustard, water, and sunscreen were to approach the door of 5. The judge informed the students that they will be able to know exactly how their rivals will advance. The students turned to the side and noticed a special watch on the tables. Edward, along with Van, prepared to take 1 pair of hours. The judge told the participants that the bracelets will help them determine their progress and the progress of rivals. The voice advised the participants to use every minute of their time to complete the stage. The twin in red called her girlfriend with fright. Chunhua rushed to her. A very frightened girl ran up and hugged her girlfriend with her hands. The judge told the participants that the countdown was supposed to begin. After 10 seconds, all the doors are closed. If someone does not pass through the door in 10 seconds, then he will be considered refused to participate and will not receive the right to join the association. The girl scaredly told her sister that they should not leave. 43 Gemini scaredly asked her sister what they will do now. The countdown began. The main character told the girl that he would take care of her younger sister. Wei looked at the girl from above and said that she could calmly go through the stage. The countdown continued. The twin closed her eyes and told the guy that she agreed. The girl hugged Chuan and told her in a calm voice that they would soon reunite. The sister closed her eyes in dismay. She barely restrained her so as not to cry. The countdown continued. The participants approached the door with various letters. The students stood and looked in front of them. The door in front of them began to open. Yuan was surprised to shout to his companions that they were in the desert. The main character, along with his colleagues, turned around and noticed that they were in the snow mountains. The judge from the monitor said in an evil voice that the first stage began for the participants. The voice told the participants that the door A was closing. Surprised Shu stood with his companions. The students felt a very strong cold. They began to cowardly from frost. Edward scaredly turned around and shouted to his companions that they were in the real mountains. The protagonist held out his hands and put a warm overalls on Chuan. The companion glanced joyfully at the guy and thanked him for his help. The protagonist turned around and saw snow mountains around him. He thought that this place would recreate the real situation. Everything looked very realistic. Ishui thought to himself that in the next room there was the same place that the association was recreated. Edward felt a very strong cold. He asked his friends with a burnt voice, what should they do? Chuan wanted to give the guy her down jacket. Edward looked at the girl and said that he could not allow the lady to freeze. The main character stepped aside along the snow cover. He told friends that they need to move. If they stand, it will become colder. Shui warned his companions that they could earn hypothermia. Then chills and psychosis will begin. If they all move, they can withstand the cold. Edward scaredly told friends that there were no signs around. He did not know where they needed to go. Edward walked with friends. He said in displeasure that there is no clue or a hint around them. Sui sternly told his companions that they need to find the way to the building where the second stage will be held. Sui realized that now judges were watching their behavior. He must behave naturally so that no one is interested in them. The protagonist commanded himself that he must necessarily remain calm. Sui was accompanied by his companions. They did not feel a very strong cold. Edward shouted his companions with a frightened voice that it became even colder around them. Sui looked around with surprise and attention. He realized that the cameras were perfectly hidden. The protagonist looked at the snowy mountains and decided that they could find cameras. Edward scaredly rushed to the main character and asked him to hug him to warm him. The girl handed her clothes to the guy and said that he could wear her. She herself was not cold. Edward promised the girl that he would put a down jacket for only 5 minutes. He scaredly shouted that Chun should not freeze. Chun told her companions that in childhood she often went through training in places with a harsh climate. She felt good. The girl pointed her friends with the hand on the cave nearby. She told them that they could make fire. Zhui told his companions that there were only snowy peaks around them. If they have been here for a long time, they will earn snow blindness. The main character, along with their companions, went to the cave to warm up. Chuan gathered a bunch of branches in her cave and prepared to light them. The main character asked the companion how many branches she found. Chuan said with the surprise of the guy that for them, as if they had to specially prepare branches here, there was not a single tree next to them. She decided to himself that the organizers knew that they would find this cave and divorce fire here. The protagonist looked around and realized that there should have been some kind of hint around. Yishui asked the satellites opposite him, did they possess fiery abilities? Chuan answered him to him that none of them had such abilities. The main character realized that he could not show anyone his special abilities. He would have to breed on his own. Shui thought displeasedly to himself that he constantly fell into troubles because of the Lin. The main character decided to inform his companions that they had only one way out. Chun took a small piece of wood in her hand. She said with a smile that she could make fire. The girl grabbed a stick with both hands and began to twirl it in brushwood to light. The protagonist looked at the actions of the companion with surprise. He was surprised due to the fact that the fire was mined with friction. Gradually, the girl's efforts began to be given fruit. Sparks began to appear near the wand. Very soon, Chun, with the help of a wand, was able to make fire in the cave. Edward warmed up near the fire. He said with a smile to friends that they seemed to be resting in the camp. The protagonist showed his companions Shiloh in his hands. He did not understand why they needed it now. The girl joyfully shouted to the guy that an all for them could be a hint at the first stage. They had to use all selected items. The main character in a surprised voice told the surprised girl that he did not think that she was very talkative. Chun asked her partner, "Did she really talk a lot now?" Edward reminded the girl that during her studies, she constantly stuck to her older sister and only talked about her. The main character reminded his companions that judges were constantly observing their behavior. Then estimates will be set. They all must show their best qualities. Sui thought to himself that Chun had excellent mental abilities. Edward shouted in a delighted voice that he wanted to blind the judges with his splendor. The main character told his companions that they should now launch all the information that they have. He invited friends to find a layer of ice in this place. Edward heard something from the side and shouted to his friends to shut up. The guy grabbed his hand by the blade. He said with excitement that there was some kind of noise on the side. The protagonist, along with his companions, became each other's back to defend himself. Edward, with excitement, told friends that something large is approaching them now. Another group of participants were at that time inside the hot desert. Yuan was accompanied by his companions in deserted sand. At this time, a watch was written off on the guy's hand. He decided to look at them. Van looked carefully at his watch. He told his companions that Group A is ahead of 5%. Yuan looked with great attention in front of him and told his companions that there was some kind of task ahead of them. Van thoughtfully told his companions that they will now advance. The guy in the cave saw a huge white lump rolled up to her. Edward looked at a strange white piece with great surprise, which was approaching him. The guy in surprise asked an unfamiliar creature, "Where are his parents?" A white lump with great fright looked at the man. He made strange sounds. Chun looked with interest at an unfamiliar creature and said that it could be a snowman. The girl joyfully shouted to the white lump that he was a snowman. The creature cried out joyfully in response. Chun, with great excitement, asked a white lump with a white lump, "Where is his mother and dad?" An unfamiliar creature with excitement shouted to himself and waved two paws. The girl scaredly noticed how a little white lump rushed at her. The white creature joyfully rushed at the girl and pressed against her. The protagonist was surprised to think to himself that an unfamiliar animal was simply pestering to Chun. Edward was surprised to tell his friends that he expected something huge to come to them. As a result, they saw a very small creature. The main character told his companion that there was something huge next to them. They cannot weaken vigilance. Chun held a white lump in her hands and joyfully told him that he was a snowman. Suddenly, the main character, along with his companion, heard a loud scream in the cave. Sei said in an exciting voice that a dangerous creature appeared in front of them. There were heavy steps of a huge monster. He walked along the cave to people. Edward was scared. He realized that a huge monster was approaching them. The main character, along with his companions, was very scared. A huge snow mutant appeared. He approached people and looked at them angrily. Yu stood silently and looked at a huge white monster studying. The white monster shouted loudly and prepared to attack people. Edward was scared and began to step aside. He repeated to himself the words about the monster. The main character said in a calm voice that in front of them is the parents of the creature who is in the arms of the girl. Chun looked carefully at a white lump in her hands. The animal looked at her in dismay. An unexpected animal took out his clawed paw and prepared to hit the girl. Chun was scared. An unfamiliar creature with all her strength hit her paw and claws. A little white animal jumped on the head of his huge parent. The creature cheerfully smiled at the girl and waved her farewell to her paw. Edward viciously shouted to a little creature that he would receive him now. The huge white monster angrily looked at people and prepared to rush at them. Edward pointed a finger at a small monster from above and called him a bastard. The main character looked at a huge creature and reasonably said that it is their hint. A snowy man lives in a cold climate. Its traces were found during many expeditions around the world. Its length reaches 7 feet. The growth of the nervous person is 4 meters. His whole body is covered with white hair. The main character looked at a huge snowy man in front of him and decided that it was better to call him a monster. Yu recalled that the snowman appeared in front of them after they entered the cave. He decided to himself that the tips appeared very clearly. The protagonist noticed how the girl jumped next to him and rushed to the attack. Edward was very scared. He called a girlfriend with an excited voice. Chun sharply swung with her hand and prepared to attack the snowman. Suddenly, there was a very strong explosion, and the girl was thrown back. After a collision with the snowy man, the girl flew far back. Chun, after an unsuccessful attack, landed on the ground near the wall in the cave. Edward looked at the girl with admiration and said that it was a strong blow. Chun got into the combat rack. She shouted to the monster that betrayal is an unforgivable act. The snowman screamed angrily and prepared to attack the girl. The main character came from the side. He shouted to the girl that she should not rush. Chun, in dismay, explained to the guy that they needed to fill up the monster. Otherwise, he would fill them up. The main character told the girlfriend that they do not know what battle the judges expect from them. There was no guarantee that after victory over the snowy man, they will receive a hint to pass the first stage. Edward noticed that the monster decided to attack them and shouted to his friends to be more careful. The snowman held out his huge paw to grab people on the ground. The main character stood without movement. He viciously looked at the attacked monster. The snowman stopped. He stood opposite the man and growled menacingly. Edward was very surprised. He did not understand why the monster stopped. A little white animal ran up and stood behind his parents' paws. The main character looked thoughtfully at the snowman and said that he had dislocation. Edward was surprised. He did not understand what dislocation could have a large monster. The main character quietly asked the girl, could she be able to deal with the mutant while he is in motionless state? Chun answered the guy that she could. The girl looked menacingly in front of her and prepared for a blow. She rushed forward. The girl jumped up high and prepared to attack the monster in flight. Chun in the flight swung with her hand and prepared to hit the mutant. The girl waved her hand with all her might and hit the monster on the head. After an unexpected blow from a person, a snowman fell to the ground. Edward was very amazed. He was surprised that the girl was able to deal with the opponent so quickly. Chun turned and went to friends. She said that the monster was disconnected. Edward scaredly repeated to the girl that she was able to deal with the mutant for one blow. The guy thought and realized that there was no dislocation to the monster. Something was very scared of a snowy man. Sui told his partner that the monster is terrible only for appearance. But you can cope with it. Edward answered the partner that there was something wrong here. The main character with a smile explained to a friend that in the exam they could not throw monsters that would be stronger. They now needed to focus on finding a hint. Edward said in a thoughtful voice that the hint should be inside a small creature. The guy suddenly heard a suspicious noise on the side. He turned there with the main character. Sue in a joyful voice told Eddie that he would think. The partner viciously answered him that his name is Edward. The protagonist was heading for a small white creature. Edward shouted angrily that he was a prince. The white animal looked at the man in dismay. He wanted to hide behind the stone. The main character swung his foot and prepared to finish off a white animal. He decided to see what was inside him. The girl and the guy headed for a small white animal. She asked him where the hint could be hidden. Edward grabbed his sword. He said that the hint can be inside the animal. Chun shouted angrily that she needed to open a small creature. The white animal was very scared when he saw that a man came up to him. Shu angrily looked at the creature and said that he told him something important, or gave something. The animal was weak and helpless. He handed a small key in his paws for a person. Shui very joyfully grabbed the key in his hands and prepared to leave. Edward, along with his friends, headed for the exit from the cave. There was a small animal inside. The guy in his hands was squealing a clock. He looked at them and appreciated the indicators. Edward smiled at the girl and shouted that she had a great blow. The judges carefully looked at the behavior of the participants on the big screen. The boy, along with other judges, carefully looked at the screen and thought that this group was of interest in him. The boy looked closely and thought to himself that the main character causes his interest. Inside the hot desert, UN passed its test with satellites. The girl told the guys on the go that people who have lost their way in the desert can see oases. As a result, the traveler may die from annoyance and disappointment. Van told his companions in great detail how the mirage is formed due to the heat. The boy explained to his friends that mirages most often appear in one place. Researchers believe that ruins can be located in such a place. The girl asked the guy if they would have mirages ahead or will not. The boy answered the companion with a dissatisfied voice that they were already going on for almost an hour. If there was a mirage in front of them, then he would have disappeared long ago. The girl said with excitement that the city in front of them could be real. Van looked with great excitement in front of him. He said that soon they will be able to find a shadow and hide from the sun. The participant was exhausted from the heat, and because of this took off her outer clothing. The girl scaredly looked around and said that she was very hot. The participant sat down on the sand and said in an exhausted voice that she would rest here. Van explained to the girl that in such a climate it is better not to expose the skin. Dehydration may threaten the body. The girl told the guy that she had already trained in such a climate with the teacher. She will definitely notice if her condition worsens. The girl told the boy that he was very hardy. She first took him for botanic. Van told the companion with a displeased voice to get up. The boy looked at his hand on his hand. He told his companions that they needed to find a hint as soon as possible. Their competitors advanced again. The girl displeasedly told her friends that there is sand around and she does not know where to start the search. UN headed forward. He said that the hint will be in the city ahead. Van Schigel on the sand and did not notice how Scorpio appeared near his shoes. Wen strictly ordered his companion so that he would not move. The boy turned around and asked the guy what happened. A huge and dangerous scorpion appeared on the ground in front of people. He was attacked with a bright beam. The guy with a luminous finger stood and carefully looked at the dangerous insect in front of him. Yuan told his friends that in front of them is a poisonous scorpion. This insect has a developed consciousness. The guy carefully looked at the insect in his hand. He said that this type of scorpion is active at night. In the afternoon, it can almost be seen. Van shouted in a frightened voice to his companions that the scorpions were moving in flocks. The girl and the guy were very surprised when they heard about a flock of scorpions. The frightened participant ran away from the sand from the group of predatory insects. A huge herd of predatory scorpions fled after the sand. Juan looked around and said that time in this place does not flow the same to the outside. Soon it could get dark. The frightened Yuan pointed his hand to the side and told friends that they needed to run there. The participants fled along the sand, and followed by a whole flock of scorpions. Yuan turned around and frightenedly and angry looked back at insects. Yuan unexpectedly established and turned around. He told friends that they need to deal with a part of a flock of scorpions. A bright radiance appeared around the body of the Yuan. He was surrounded by lightning. A whole flock of scorpions fled towards the guy. He prepared to attack them. Yuan screamed very loudly. He launched a bright lightning against scorpions. Bright lightning struck scorpions. Van scared his companions so that he no longer attacked insects. Van explained to his friend that insects from the attack became only fiercely. They needed to run away. Yuan stood and looked at a huge flock of dangerous insects. Yuan scaredly ran aside. He shouted that the sand is falling under them. The guy turned around on the move and noticed as if something had risen from under the ground. Yuan fled with his companions and noticed how the castle appeared in front of them. The girl turned frightened and told a friend that the scorpions were behind them. Van answered her that he did not know why this happened. Wen thoughtfully said that insects for some reason do not dare to go to the city. Suddenly, a huge and predatory monster rose from the sand. He handed his claw to people. The monster crawled out of the ground and obscured the sun before people. There were huge dust clubs around. Yuan looked at a huge mutant and said that he would now move to the city. Van explained to his partners with a reasonable voice that the organizers want to force them to enter the city. Yuan looked at the city with excitement. He told friends that if they come in, they would do it as they were told the wall. The guy's hand was brightly lit up. He told his companions that perhaps they would have to fight with a flock of scorpions. Van turned around and told friends that in the desert their endurance was spent just like outside. If a flock of insects is destroyed, then a new one will appear. As a result, they all die of exhaustion. The guy told his friends that the only way out for them is to enter the city. The girl became in a fighting pose. She asked the companions if they would enter the city or will fight. Van thought deeply. He did not know what choice in such a situation the judges were expected of them. Suddenly, the boy ran inside the city. He shouted to friends that they needed to go inside. There they will rest and come up with what to do next. The girl, along with her companions, ran to the city at full speed. Their actions were followed by judges through the monitor. The boy turned around and asked the teacher how interesting he is how the exam is taking place this year. The man in a chair strictly demanded from the boy to answer essentially. The subordinate answered the teacher that this group was able to figure out the situation. The boy looked with great interest at the monitor. He told the man that when he was following the unraveling of riddles by the participants, he seemed to watch a detective series. The participants approached the plate and read that they need to go to the temple in order to get a hint. The girl said in surprise that there was a very bad handwriting on the plate. Yuan told the girl that the organizers wanted to inflate them. Van told his friends that the organizers drove them by the nose. Most likely they will be removed points for their actions. Yuan asked his friend whether they will now go to the temple or not. Van joyfully replied that they would go to the temple, as they want it from them. The boy slyly explained to his partners that they were in a trap of their own free will. The girl went to the door. She told her companions that they could follow her. The organizers would not let them just die. Van joyfully explained to his companion that if they got into the trap, it means that they are prey. The boy carefully monitored the actions of the participants through the monitor. He listened carefully to them. The judge joyfully told himself that all participants came to an end. Yuan, accompanied by their companions, went inside the building. There was silence around. The boy was squealing a clock in his arms. He looked at their testimony. Van, inside the temple, told his companions that the percentage of passage was updated. He asked if the door closed behind them. The girl was cut. She told her companions that it was very cold around them. Yuan handed his clothes to his companion and said that she would put it on. The girl was surprised due to the fact that the guy offered her sunscreen. Van folded his hands and carefully looked at the unfamiliar box in the center of the temple. The boy told his friends that they need to try to open a wooden box. The girl joyfully shouted to friends that they needed to go. The boy told his companion, displeased, that she would even think at least sometimes. The participant ran sharply and grabbed the box in her hands. The guys looked at her with surprise. The girl pointed her finger at the lock on the box and said that she could not open it. The participant turned frightened and told friends that they needed a key. Van went to the girl and said that she at least sometimes listened to others. The girl sat on top of the box. She told friends that the organizers would not have bothering with empty decorations. The boy slowly walked towards the box with the girl. At this time, the floor under it began to crack. Yuan scaredly extended his hand forward and shouted to his friend to stop. The boy stopped and looked fearfully at his feet in front of him. He realized that there was some kind of mechanism under him. The boy walked in fright on the floor. Tiles under it began to move with my feet. The girl stood on the platform and held a wooden chest in her hand. She looked in surprise at her companions. The participant looked with interest at her companions and said that they would approach her. Yuan shouted with excitement to the boy not to move. There was a mechanism from below it. Yuan with excitement explained to the boy that the organizers would not put inactive mechanisms here. Suddenly a loud noise rang out. The columns inside the temple began to shift. Yuan looked at it in dismay. People scaredly looked at the walls of the temple. The boy thought that now an axe or a bunch of poisonous arrows could fly out on them. Van looked with excitement under his feet in front of him and decided that there would be a classic trap. At this time on the side, someone began to walk. Under the feet of an unknown monster began to crack. Yuan frightenedly turned to the side. He did not believe that a living creature was approaching them. The guy scaredly thought to himself that the roar was very strong. This means that something huge went to them. Suddenly there was a wave of a huge axe. Someone decided to attack people. The huge warrior swung his big axe to attack people. He cut the columns. A tall fighter stood with an axe and looked displeased at the yuan on the ground. The guy was scared. He realized that they would have to fight against a stone thug with an axe. Suddenly, a warrior with an axe appeared on the side. He stood motionless and motionless. Another fighter came up from the side. He threw the ground a huge sharp blade. People were scared. They realized that now another rival was against them. Yuan stood motionless on the ground and looked scaredly at a huge warrior. Two huge warriors stood and looked from a height at people. There were dust clubs around. The frightened Yuan could not understand why the two monsters stood and did not begin to attack them. Van raised his hand and explained to his friend that while he was holding his leg on a stone slab, the giants could not budge. Yuan asked his friend to give him time to think. Yuan looked concentrated in front of him. He told a friend that he would come up with now. The girl with a chest in her hand shouted to the boy so that he would not be worried. She promised that they would protect him. Van looked scared at the girl and shouted so that she would not move. The girl calmly sat down on her knees. She told friends that she would have time to escape before the giants would do something. The monsters suddenly grabbed their weapons and swung. Yuan was scared and looked at giants with great excitement and did not understand what was happening. Demonic warriors swung with blades and prepared to attack a person. Van shouted displeasedly to the girl and asked what she did. The participant calmly replied that she just put the box in place. The boy told his companions with a soothing voice that now no one would move. Van excitedly explained to his friends that the giants are under someone else's control. The main character, along with his friends, stood in the middle of an ice lake. He did not know where he could use the key in this place. Edward displeased his friends in displeasure that he first goes through trials, where there are no tips. The protagonist told his friends that he did not see any hooks, that the treasure was hidden nearby. Shui told friends that the test for the game appears a special exam for the intelligence department. Edward answered the guy that the progress of the group had stopped. They themselves needed to accelerate. Chun carefully looked at the ice under her feet. She said that there could be a lot of space from below the lake. The girl looked with interest through the ice. She said that there could be a huge building from below. The main character looked down under the ice and decided that such an opportunity also could not be excluded. Edward hugged the girl and said that everything was fine with her imagination. The main character activated X-ray vision. He looked closely under the ice. Shu with great attention looked with the help of an X-ray vision under his feet. The guy was surprised to notice how a huge box was under the ice. The main character looked at his friends. He needed to tell them that there was something under the ice. The judges should not suspect this. Edward grabbed Bolshoi in his hand. He decided to try to break through the ice. The protagonist told his friends that a lot of money was spent on building the environment. Everything around them could not be created just for a look. The main character told friends that they received a key that could open a chest or door. By logic, there should be something under the ice from below. The main character with excitement thought to himself that his words had to convince his friends. Edward held an awl in his hands. He said with excitement that with the help of this large needle they can open something or break something. The guy with shill in his hands joyfully looked at his friends and said that he would do everything. The main character thought to himself that his companion was smarter than he thought. Chun in surprise asked a friend what he was doing. Edward pounded with an awl with a frozen lake and told the girl that he was splitting the ice. The main character, along with the girl, looked at his friend with displeasure. Edward smiled cheerfully. Chun looked at a friend and said that you can break the ice with one blow. The guy answered the girl that if there is something under the ice, then because of the blow they can damage the thing. The girl told her friends a traitor's voice, which was cold around them. She had a feeling, as if it were -10. The main character looked up. He said that the temperature on a piece of ice is controlled by people. The judges did not want them to stay here for a long time. Edward took off his outer clothing and handed it to the girl. He cheerfully told her that such a large man as he should not wear a down jacket. Chun put on a dense jacket. She told friends that there are no places around them that can be explored. The main character thought that there was a building at the bottom of the ice. They needed to move there. Due to surveillance cameras, he could not apply his ability and melt the ice. The main character told friends that if one of them had fiery abilities, then they could melt the ice. The main character looked aside at friends. He saw that they were cold and they would not last long. Sui, with the help of his ability, could maintain heat inside his body. The judges carefully looked at the participants. The boy told the teacher that this group was moving more slowly. In his opinion, the main character was quite interesting. The boy told the man that Shui behaves calmly and reasonably. He also gives other people a chance to solve everything. The teacher held a cup in his hands. He told the guy that the main character did not seem to want to attract attention. The boy asked the man what he thinks about it. The teacher silently sat in an armchair. The little judge remembered that in the cave, the snowman suddenly numb. The protagonist in strength was definitely superior to members of the group A. The teacher in an armchair said that he checked in the list of all participants. The main character did not come in order to pass the exam, pushed him up by Lin. The teacher demanded that the boy call a girl here. He wanted to ask her what was happening. The teacher carefully looked at the video of the protagonist on the monitor. The man sat in an armchair and continued to repeat the name of the guy to himself. At this time, Edward was sitting on top of the ice lake and tried to break through its surface. He shouted that he was very difficult. Edward shouted displeasedly to his friends that they usually give tips in quests. Now they are forced to rely only on intuition. Chun held out her hands to a friend and said that they would soon come up with something. The main character heard some noise on the side. He turned his head. The participants were scared. One of them shouted that some noise came from behind the trees. Suddenly, some huge monster pulled out a tree and threw it from above. The girl very quickly threw off her outer clothing and shouted to her friends to be more careful. The main character stood calmly and looked in front of him. There were frightened friends from behind him. There was a very powerful explosion, and the girl was thrown far to the side. The snowman came up and laid his huge paws on the trees. Chun looked at the monster in dismay. She was unhappy due to the fact that he came. There was a clatter of a large number of legs. Several huge, angry snow people appeared on the side. Zhui looked joyfully at the monsters. He realized that with their help, ice on the lake would quickly break out. A huge crowd of snow people walked forward along the lake towards people. Shui screamed in fright that the snowman got out of the cave and brought friends. Shui rather thought to himself that he had a good acting game. The girl looked angrily at the monster and said that there would be one outcome for them. Shui scaredly shouted to his girlfriend that he needed to cope with snow people, as last time. Edward held out his hand and grabbed the dagger. He shouted to his friends that he himself would figure it out. Edward turned around and told the main character that his rapier had not struck anyone. The guy angry heavily forward to attack snow people. The main character shouted to a friend to leave at least one monster for him to break the ice. A group of snowy people stood and looked very viciously at people. Chun looked at the monsters in dismay. She did not understand why they froze. The main character looked at mutants. Snow people stood motionless. The main character decided that they needed to see what monsters were going to do. Snow people rushed to Edward. The guy with a blade was scared back. Edward looked scared at snowy people. He did not understand what they planned. Suddenly, one of the monsters opened his mouth. A bright pink glow appeared from it. Edward was scared with his hands. He felt some powerful energy in front of him. The guy felt a strong relaxation in his body. He began to fall and said that he was pleased. Shui was very amazed. He looked at his companion with great surprise. The girl ran to Edward and shouted that she would help him now. Zui screamed from behind her girlfriend to stop. The main character thought with displeasure that two friends did not let him relax for a minute. Snow people stood near the unconscious guy and talked among themselves. Chun asked her friend with excitement, how did he feel? Edward answered her that he was feeling great. The girl angrily asked the monsters, what did they do with the guy? She did not understand why Edward behaved like that. The protagonist thought displeasedly that snowy people used a vile reception against them. The monsters opened their mouths and began to attack people using multicolored energy. The girl covered herself with her hands to protect herself from the attack of snow people. Suddenly, Chun was struck by an unexpected feeling. She felt weak. The girl could no longer stand on her feet. She felt warm and relaxation. The weakened Chun said barely audibly that she was very hot among the snow peaks. She decided to take off her clothes. The main character ran to a girlfriend and grabbed her by the shoulder. He shouted to come to her senses. Chun was in a semi-conscious state. She told the main character that she was very hot. The girl said in a barely audible voice that she was hot. She asked the protagonist, wasn't it hot? Shu sat near his girlfriend and replied that he was not hot at all. Monsters stood nearby. The snowman opened his mouth and began to attack the protagonist with the help of energy. A very evil mutant directed the flows of multicolored energy against people. Edward, along with his girlfriend, lay on the ground and could not rise. They felt strong heat in the body. The main character looked at his companions displeasedly. He realized that they no longer had the strength. Sui in a strict voice told himself that he would not go further. Around him was a bright twist. The main character closed his eyes. He prepared to telepathically attack the monsters. Sei looked strictly at the mutants and demanded that they do not spoil his plans. The main character looked carefully at the mutants. He stood in front of them at a short distance. The monsters felt very strong energy from the guy. They began to disappear. Snow people, after an attack from a person, began to fall massively frozen to the ground. The main character stood and looked at the bodies of snowy people in front of him. The main character stood among the snowy peaks. In front of him lay an unconscious body of a snowman. A frightened little animal climbed above the body of an unconscious monster. Chun lay without strength on the ground and felt a very strong heat in the body. The girl was in an unconscious state with her eyes closed. The main character stood silently and looked at the unconscious Edward and Chun. Zui saw a message in the wristwatch. Group B was able to advance up to 60%. The main character was completely lonely. He silently looked at the snowy mountains. Gradually in the mountains it began to darken. Snow fell on the ground on top. The girl and the guy lay in a small hut. The main character pulled them there. Shui divorced a small fire near the hut. He decided with his help to warm up and help his friends. Edward woke up and asked the protagonist, "Is it really night?" Edward asked the protagonist with excitement. What happened and why did he not remember anything? Shui cunningly offered his friend to try to get to his feet. The guy tried to rise. He told a friend that he did not feel his legs and he seemed to be completely exhausted. Edward, barely standing on his feet, asked the protagonist, "What happened?" Shui calmly explained to his friend that all his energy was sucked out of him. The girl began to recover in a hut. She opened one eye. Chun looked at herself in dismay and noticed that she had no clothes. The protagonist told a frightened girl that she would not be worried. She looked at the girl and explained that everything had ended quickly and nothing had time to happen. Chun sat and looked aside. She felt exhausted. Edward looked aside and asked the protagonist, "What happened to the snowy monsters?" Yu showed his finger to the side and explained to his friend that the monsters were there. A large group of snow people sat on top of ice in a circle and raked something with their paws. The mutants persistently worked. The main character told friends that snow people decided to help them break the ice. Edward was very surprised. He scaredly shouted that this is impossible. The main character sat near the fire and told friends that he could not deceive them. Sui explained to his companions that he had the gift of influence on the psyche. He was able to hypnotize snow people. The main character thought that it was very good that Lin did not leave information about his superpowers anywhere. Edward thoughtfully told his partner that in the intelligence department, people with similar abilities will definitely come in handy. The boy carefully monitored the group of participants through the monitor. The main character told friends that they need to go and control the process. The little judge was surprised when he heard that the protagonist could affect the psyche. There was no information about this in his questionnaire. The main character approached snowy people and asked how they were doing. The monster was very scared when he saw a man. He screamed very loudly. The snowman with excitement showed his hand to the main character on a hole in the ice above the lake. The main character looked at a large hole and said that it was not bad. Satisfied snow people stood nearby. Edward told the main character that he worked very well for the 3rd level. The main character turned around and told friends that the passage is open and they could go down. Edward looked at the protagonist and the girl and said that they were moving forward. Chun looked very cheerfully and joyfully at her friends and prepared to go with them. The girl, accompanied by Edward, jumped deep into the lake. The protagonist turned around and told the monsters that their work was over and they can go. The guy went to the edge of the ice and jumped forward. The mutants looked with interest after him. The main character, after the jump, landed on the cover of a huge box. Nearby stood his friends. Jui silently stood on the roof of a huge box. His friends were silent nearby. The protagonist looked closely and noticed the hole of the castle on the roof of the box. Jui joyfully grabbed the key in his hands and said fun that he was in front of him. The main character put the key to the castle and turned it to open it. The watch on the guy's hand showed that the success of Group A was 60%. The girl stood on the bridge. Next to her in the hall of the temple were her friends. Van scaredly asked Hwa's girlfriend how could she go forward. The girl thought. She remembered to herself how she was able to get to the platform. Hana told friends that she simply did not pay attention to anything and just passed. Van, frightened, asked her girlfriend from what place she began to move. Hana told a friend that she was at first on the left. Then she jumped a couple of steps from him. The boy carefully looked at the tile under his feet. He thought where to move. Hana slyly smiled at her friend and said that everything seems to be so. Van carefully looked at the tiles under his feet. He thought where to go further. The boy realized that the mechanism is definitely connected with tiles. He did not know in what sequence to press them. The boy realized that the tiles in the middle of the temple are a square with sides of 6-on-6 plates. Van scaredly thought that the mechanism could start if he goes to the left and then click on 2 plates. The boy angrily asked his girlfriend what 2 plates she stepped at the very beginning. Hwa displeasedly explained to the partner that no one remembers the traces that she was going on. The girl told her friends that they could just go forward and go around the mechanism. Van explained to the interlocutor that everything could not be so simple in the exam. Hwa viciously shouted to friends that they constantly think a lot and complicate everything. She decided that the statues are very large and they need to be destroyed until the mechanism came into effect. The girl stretched her hands. She told the guy to provide all this for her. Van scaredly showed the girl a hand and said that she was in no hurry. He decided to think a little. A girlfriend shouted in response that she was fighting perfectly. The girl rushed forward and shouted that she herself could cope. The girl ran to the big warriors at speed and prepared to attack them. The guys very frightenedly noticed to themselves that the giants stirred. The boy shouted in a frightened voice to her girlfriend to beware. At this time, one of the giants opened his mouth to attack the opponent with red fire. Yuen was frightened. He realized that the giant was preparing to attack. He activated the zipper in his hand. The girl scaredly noticed how fire appeared in the mouth of one of the warriors. The girl, scared, looked in front of her and realized that she would not have time to dodge. Yuan extended his arms forward and with the help of bright lightning began to attack the giants. Wen used a bright lightning and was able to demolish the head of one of the giants. The girl scaredly noticed how red lightning hit the column next to her. The large column began to fall. Hua jumped up to keep it. Yuan shouted to the girl so that she would not let the column fall to the ground. Yuan shouted very viciously to the girl to bounce to the side. There were bright lightning in his hands. The girl in flight flashed away from the column and far flew to the side. Yin shouted loudly. He decided to destroy the column with the help of his magic. The girl sharply pulled away from the column in the flight and flew to the ground. After a lightning, a huge crown scattered into small pieces, and the girl, along with the guy, scaredly stood on the floor. Frightened, Wan told his friends that they scared him to death. The boy scaredly shouted to the girl that she should warn before doing something. Hua stood displeased aside. After a small pause, the girl frightenedly asked for forgiveness from friends. Yuan asked the boy whether the statues reacted to the girl's attack. The boy was silent. He looked intently and carefully in front of him. Van told friends that the judges did everything so that they would advance further and did not defeat the statues, but solve the mechanism. Yuan answered the partner that the statues are moving, according to what decisions they make. Van told his friend that they can only try. Using calculations, they will be able to push to any conclusion about the next hint. Yuan looked at his friend and said that he was very smart and he leaves his calculations. The boy asked his friend with excitement, what did he mean? Wen looked at the boy and told him in a strict voice that they would change. Yuan came up on the side and put his leg on the tile near the boy's foot. Van shouted to his friends with excitement that he would make sure that they all came out intact and unharmed. Yen told his friends that he would also find a way to cope with this. The boy pointed his hand to the girl and said that she would now fulfill his orders. He asked her to always think before doing something. Hua dutifully bowed to a friend. The boy thought. He carefully remembered how the girl passed through the tile. Van in the mind thought out the entire route, which can be safe to go through the tile. After small thoughts, the boy calculated that the region on the right on the tile will be more dangerous. Van thoughtfully decided to himself that if he stepped on the moving part of the tile, then this activates the stone giant. The boy realized that the giant acts regardless of how a person behaves. Tiles and board have some connection. Van thought for a moment. He did not understand what was connecting the squares in front of him. The boy decided to himself that the judges could not just arrange the squares. This would not be an exam, but a deliberate murder. The boy asked the girl, where are the 2 squares that she jumped? Hana scaredly grabbed her head. She could not remember her path by tiles. The girl told her friends that she did not remember exactly, but maybe she passed the squares that are in the center. Van asked the girl very incredulously, was she sure? Hua with excitement explained to a friend that after landing, she took a few steps to get to this place. A girlfriend showed her friend fingers as she walked. She was not sure that she simply did not rise at the end. Van, with great surprise, listened to the story and explanation of the girl. The boy joyfully told the girlfriend that all this could be an allusion to 9 palaces feng shui. Yuan thoughtfully explained to his friends that in the palace of feng shui, the equivalent of 4 squares will be a palace. Yuan looked at his leg. He said this place is a palace with an odd number. Van looked at the guy with interest and asked if he wanted to try. The protagonist slyly looked at the boy and said that they together know who would risk it. Van waved his hand and said that she was careful and defended from the attacks of the statue. Yin sharply pulled himself away from the ground and sharply jumped forward to the tile. The guy landed on the tile and pressed it. He shouted to his friends so that no one would move. Yen stood on the tile on the floor and tried not to move. There was silence around. The guy calmly said to the girl to come to her squares to the right of her. Ha looked very scared. She walked very carefully on the tile on the floor. The girl joyfully shouted to friends that nothing had happened, and that means that they were right. Van joyfully shouted to a friend that he had a great luck. They could win in a casino if they got out of here. The girl shouted in a delighted voice to friends that they were able to solve about the feng shui palace. Van joyfully explained to the girl that he accidentally guessed it. A girlfriend angrily shouted to his partner that he could be mistaken. Yuan hugged his friend and said that the boy is a 5th-level supercomputer, who needs a little information to answer. Hua, in a displeased voice, told a friend that she would no longer call him a botanist. The participants approached the chest. Yuan said that they just need to open the entrance and they will finish everything. The girl asked friends, if they step on the tile, would stone giants come to life? The boy explained to his friends that giants could live only if the odd palace would click on the stove. Van explained to his friends that pressing should correspond to the 9 palaces of feng shui. The boy stretched to the castle on the chest and prepared to open it. Yin listened very carefully. There was complete silence inside. Suddenly, the castle opened very easily. The boy opened the chest cover. Van looked with great surprise inside the chest. Surprised friends stood next to him. The participants saw how a small red button was at the bottom of the chest. The girl turned around and asked a friend, should she press? Van answered her girlfriend to press. Hua extended her hand inside the chest and pressed her red button. The girl pressed the button and tiles inside the temple began to sink in the center. The boy looked with interest at his clock to find out the level of execution of the task. Van noticed that the sensor on the clock showed that both groups completely completed the task. The young man with glasses stood at the steps in the basement and looked down. The girl asked if this was a trap, looking wary into the basement, to which the boy explained that even if it is a trap, they still need to go down, because the progress of the group and also reached 100%. A comrade in glasses first began to go down the steps, turning to his friends. He asked to go forward, because he does not think that they would be so boring as to install a mechanism here. Moreover, since the progress indicator showed that progress is 100%, it means the first stage of the examination has been passed, and the next stage should be the next. When they descended, Chunhua really hoped that her sister was not injured, and now they had already approached the door. The guy opened the door and immediately looked into it, trying to see what was inside. Only he wanted to say something about a group that had not yet come, as a healthy guy turned out to be in front of them. The big man held the girl's sister, and a fair-haired guy in the other hand very tightly. Edward greeted and exclaimed, turning to his brother, that he was very pleased to meet him again. The guys looked at them carefully. They realized that they had met their opponents here. Group A is a group of 3 people, and it seems to be the talent of the output class, but in their group he cannot help. Group A members seem to be combat talents and will be a little difficult. The girl thought about what happened to her sister's clothes, because she had just passed the battle. A fair-haired guy also thought that his appearance seemed not very beautiful. The group member thought that this is an intellectual opponent, but the last test does not require the use of the brain or normal logical thinking. The guys decided to try to steal it. They began to run together to the column. The girl asked Chun Tian whether she really wants to steal from her sister. The sister replied that it was so this test, and not a pair from Kongjung, after which she apologized. The girl could not understand why Chun Tian behaves as a completely different person, to which she replied that in fact she was not weaker than her sister. Chun Tian decided to go first and began to run faster and faster, overtaking her. The girl grabbed her hand and asked what she was going to do. Chun Tian began to scream and ask what she was doing, asking to let her go. The sister replied that she expressed herself clearly and asks her not to leave. Chun Tian immediately asked what was incomprehensible here, and again asked to let her go, because they were still in the test. The sister asked the girl what drug she took in her eyes, why even her personality has changed in just one day, and how she dares to scream her sister at her. Chun Tian asked her to let her go again and said that they would talk about this later. But the girl went to her sister again and said, taking her by the shoulders, that she would not let her go. Chun Tian got angry and took her sister with her hand by the hair. She called her and said that she would break her face. In response, she also took her by the hair and asked how she dares to pull her by the bangs, and her discipline is really not important to her. She does not even know whether something should do something about it. Chun Tian exclaimed that from childhood, she always has been facing her, probably because she was afraid that she would overtake her. The sisters began to fight while the rest of the guys had already approached their goal. They turned towards the girls and everyone thought about this, trying to understand that they did not share. The guys thought to come or not to stop the fight. After all, looking at all this is not very good. The guy thought that this method really works and could stop Chun Tian and Chun Hua. He went to the girl and said that he had something interesting for her. Chun Tian asked what exactly. The guy explained that during training he saw that she was hiding behind Chun Hua and interact with him, so he thought she was an introvert. The girl did not expect this, and angry asked if everything was thinking so. Then Edward explained to her that they finished the first stage of the test before Group B, so he asked to better relax and chat. Chun Tian dropped her head down, said that her sister always thinks that she was not growing up yet, so nothing allows her to do. The guy replied that she did not feel that she needed her protection and wants her praise. If they meet later, then they can do it. The rest eavesdropped on the conversation. Chun Tian said, approaching her sister, that she was born 2 minutes earlier than her. Does she really think that she is older than she? She began to scream again, looking at her sister, that she would break her face. Chun Hua asked what she had just said. The guys began to observe the words that was happening, and sadly looked at two sisters who could not get along with each other. The guy who climbed between them thought that the plan passed quite well, due to the exception that these two were a little uncontrollable. Then you just need to let Edward detain Yuanjie, and he thinks that he is not able to defeat him, so he can press the button. It will be the discount of Chun Hua and raising the rating for Chun Tian. It will also allow Yuanjie and Edward to completely demonstrate his abilities. In this round, Yurchin, and he will be relatively in the middle of the road. Then, he will click a button for receiving additional bonus points, and he will be in a safe position. The guy considered himself a little genius. A fair-haired guy came up to him and said that he would hold Yuanjie while he presses the button. The boy asked if he was sure of this. Then he will detain Yurchin and leave Yuanjie to him. The guy decided that it was very good since this is exactly what he wanted. Edward was delighted with this plan, and they agreed since the victory belongs to their Group A. The guy in glasses told Yuanjie that Edward wants to use this moment. The guys began to approach each other, and Edward took out a sharp saber to seek his opponent. He asked who said he was going to use this moment. He called himself an open and honest man, and handed the saber towards the boy. Yuanjie asked his comrade to click on the button and explained that he would get off here. The comrade understood the guy and exhaled heavily. He began to make his way towards the switch. He held his hands in front of him, trying to put the block from a powerful gust of wind. It was very difficult for him to resist such a stream of a hurricane, and he did not let go of his hands. The wind was too strong, and he made his way step by step, trying to resist him. The enemy, when he saw that the guy was going to the switch, he realized that he did not think about it. Now there was a dead end in front of him. Xiaowen was in a hurry about his business, and thought that he would definitely succeed, but droplets of sweat began to drain across his face. After all, his detachment came to the final goal first. He began to grab his head and shouted that this was the end. Xiaowen did not know what to do now. What he thought when he agreed to join this damned association. Or he could not think at all. The guy with glasses asked what was wrong with him. It stands in the corner and grinds all the time. He became interested in whether he was going to fight with him today, or will continue to stand and grimace. Meanwhile, Edward called his enemy a worthy opponent and exclaimed that he was also not a mistake. The guy began to use his abilities and released the arrow of courage from his hands. He began to use a 5th level blow, and a bright fiery flame flew towards the enemy. Edward called Yuan-jae to his place and asked not to stand a pillar, as he would kill him now. Then the boy began to use his abilities, and in his hands a bright ball inside which was glowed with lightning. These lightnings were like a blue outbreak, and a whole volley rose towards the enemy. Edward did not expect this, and was simply shocked by such a powerful power of Yuan-jae. There was a strong explosion, and blue lightning scattered in different directions. The guys began to fall to the ground from such a strong wave. Edward put the defense with his hands, but he did not succeed. He realized that this guy had used extreme abilities, and was very surprised by this. Yuan-jae exclaimed, approaching the enemy, that now his turn had come. Edward asked the enemy to slow down his turnover since he was very scared. Meanwhile, his comrades said that they arrived, and today he would die again. The boy with glasses noticed that his comrades were fighting, and at least he has been henna standing on his ceiling and spitting into it. His leg was injured. Chunhua is busy with his sister. Yuan-jae is still busy Edward. The boy thought that he should not go through anything and finish this exam. Meanwhile, the struggle of Edward and Yuan-jae continued, and they did not let their swords out of their hands. They again met in a fierce battle, and the battle continued. The guys were both very strong. Edward tried to hit his enemy, but he could not get into him. The guy realized that Yuan-jae was too fast, and he did not have time to dodge his blows. Meanwhile, Xiaowen was already screaming, continued to think about how to be. Suddenly, a good thought dawned on him. It is necessary to make sure that there are no winners, but how to crank it all without unnecessary publicity. He continued to think about it. The idea appeared in the head of this guy again, and he decided to act according to his plan. He clenched his fist and exclaimed that Edward had to hold on. Then Edward asked him like a boy. Xiaowen asked the guy first to help Chun's, and ran to fulfill his plan. The guy decided to guess the correct trajectory for starters. And even if this shorty did not have time before. Meanwhile, the bespectacled man thought that he turned around and ran away at such a moment. He probably had not everything at home. Xiaowen really behaved in some strange way, and he had already approached the sisters. They were very evil, and turning to him asked what he needed. Xiaowen asked the girls not to quarrel, as this is just an exam. He invited them to figure out later. In the end, they are the sisters, so that Chunhua is stronger, because it doesn't matter. The guy pushed them with his foreheads and decided to bring them to the handle so that they would give him in the face. Chuntian asked Xiaowen why he said that turned to him. Then the guy asked if he was right. She herself said that she did not want to live in the shadow of her sister, and apologized to himself to the girls because he had a question of life and death, and he would later ask for forgiveness. Chunhua was pretty smart, and asked if he decided to quarrel them. Xiaowen approached her and asked if he said something wrong. Is she really afraid that the sister will once surpass her? He approached the girl's face and exclaimed that nothing terrible, because people did not live like that. Finally, he waited for the moment which was waiting for so long, and the girls had already approached him clenching his fists. They found themselves near the enemy's face and swung together their fists. Meanwhile, Edward had already flown far away from the powerful blow of his enemy. Yuan-jae did his job by plunging Edward with a powerful blow on his back. He pushed him away with all his might, and the enemy fell with his back on the stones. Ochkarik was watching everything joyfully that their victory was. The strongest fiery flash occurred, and bright fire lit up everything around. Yuan-jae asked Van Toon to be careful, and warning him, rushed forward. After a powerful explosion, Xiaowen fell on the stones. Thick puffs of smoke rose up. The girls were very surprised and asked if they were so crashed to him. Meanwhile, the woman stood crossing her arms over her chest near the rating table. She was seriously configured and her gaze was very strict. The guys sat at her desks in front of her. They all expected that they would tell them today, and their faces were angry and serious. The woman exclaimed that she asked them not to go too far. They turned the test of the intelligence detachment into the test of a combat detachment. Since no one pressed the button, points for this will not be accrued for anyone, and for the sabotage of several people they will deduct a bonus for the first month of work. The sisters lowered their eyes to the floor and said that they did not think that Xiaowen would fly so far. Edward also sat sad, and with tears in his eyes asked why he had a bonus. The woman smiled maliciously and exclaimed her hands to the sides, which would now announce the results of the test. Xiaowen thought that he should definitely not take first place. He deliberately made several mistakes during the test, and for each of them he must lose points. Apparently, Yuanzhe showed himself very well and first place behind him, and the most important thing for him is to live longer. The boy thought about it. He decided that from the very beginning of Xiaowen, he was behaving too strange, and moving his eyebrows to his nose lowered his head down. It was obvious that he could press the button, but instead he ran back. Perhaps he is paranoid, but even his ability is not suitable for intelligence and what he does here at all. The woman began to speak by what criteria they evaluated and who took first place. Xiaowen was completely covered with streams of sweat. He was very worried and thought that if he doesn't take first place, he promises that he would read the Buddha in at least 3 days. Wenjie noticed looking at the guy that he was very worried about this rating, and all while waiting for closing his eyes. The woman was waiting for a pause at others. Having suspended a little, she exclaimed that Yuanzhe occupied the first place. Xiaowen was very upset and immediately got up from his seat, stretched out to his full height. The woman looked at him and asked. He was really dissatisfied with the result. Then the guy sat down on a chair again and answered her that no. Suddenly, he jumped up and began to joyfully scream throughout the audience. Xiaowen was very happy that he did not get the first place, and tears sparkled in his eyes. The girl went to the board and said that she would announce the last place. She asked Chunhua whether she agreed that she showed herself the worst of all. Chunhua lowered her head down and smiling sadly replied that she agreed. The woman explained that the head of Lin would later be sentenced to her. The girl sighed sadly and did not know what to answer. Chun Tian went to her sister, throwing a sad look on her. Edward watched what was happening, and anger lurked into his heart. He looked towards Xiaowen. The guy asked him to look at him. What happened to him? Xiaowen sat at his desk, lowering his head down. He exclaimed that everything was fine and he was in order. Edward asked whether he was crying because he did not take first place, and asked him not to worry so much. In the end, they have to act together in the future, and not alone. Xiaowen replied that he was right, and asked not to pay attention to him. A woman with a notebook in her hands explained that it was just a small test, so that they would think over their mistakes and avoid repetition in the real world. She reported that all the free of 10 at 10 in the morning, the head of Lin meet everyone. The girl raised her hand up and said goodbye to exclaim that she still needed to work. Edward went to Yuanzhe and congratulated him. He asked the owner of a lightning talent. For some reason, Yuanzhe thought about Shushavenya. It turns out that he is from the Yuan family. Edward went up to the boy again and asked him to hear him, but he seemed to have not heard what they asked him. Xiaowen, meanwhile, was walking very pleased along the corridor with outstretched arms. He reached the elevator and wanted to go into it. Then the door opened and he saw a girl with a child. He told her that she had not really recovered, and she was already forced to return to work. Her battle unit is too harsh. Then the girl explained to the boy that they would meet with new members tomorrow. Therefore, she was discharged from the hospital ahead of time. She and the boy left the elevator, and Xiaowen, on the contrary, drove inside. He seemed to be in the clouds and was on his wave. It is not clear what was in his head. The guys thought about why he was so happy. He was completely different, and his joy knew no bounds. It feels like he won the lottery. Meanwhile, Lin Mei Miao called and said that she was given another week and no more. The girl asked to wait a little more, but she threatened that if she could not return the money, she would pay her body. Lin Mei Miao seemed to be not very upset and asked not to worry. Xiaowen told the girl that she is very calm, at least completely in debt, and why only she bought this lipstick. If she has extra money, then it is better to let her debt. Lin Mei Miao asked if she was now not to please herself because of debts. Gathering her hair in the tail, the girl explained that she always lives every day as the last. She explained to the guy that there is always a way out in life, and there is no need to think about the future. Actually, she did not think about the future, but lived every day as if the last. Lin Mei Miao approached Xiaowen and said that she still has such a dairy cow like him. The guy looked at her with a sad look and answered displeasedly that he almost died because of her. Lin Miamu asked him not to be angry and said that she could satisfy him in any way that he would only wish. Xiaowen replied that it was not necessary, and the girl said that she was told if she was not repaying a debt, she would pay her body. In this case, she can pay this debt to him now. The guy looked roughly at her and asked to get off him. Then she asked if he had hatched her. Xiaowen replied that he did not hate her, and they simply cooperate with her. The girl had a frustrated, frightened look, and she blushed a little. Suddenly, her sister entered the room and said that she found out something. She was very surprised when she saw a guy and asked what they were doing here. Lin Mei Miao was upset and jumped up from his knees, asked why she did not knock on the door. Xiaowen also asked why she was here. The girl modestly lowered her gaze and replied that the door was open, so she went. To herself, she thought, do they really have any relationship? Lin Mei Miao asked Xiaowen in the future not to forget to close the door behind him. The guy sadly answered that he would not forget about completely different, and not about stupid things. Lin Miao said that one of them could become her assistant after 3 months of internship. The girl thought that it was necessary to behave naturally so as not to arouse suspicion. She behaved unnaturally. Wen asked why he then goes through all these tests if he could simply become her assistant. If not for his brilliant ideas, she would now accompany his corpse in the crematorium. Lin Miamu replied that she could not take him to the assistants. The association has long wanted to recruit someone from the Van family, and then the second lady of the Van family appeared. Naturally, he had priority. The sister approached them, and approached the guy asked for forgiveness. Wen told her not to apologize, and from that moment they can be considered half-colleagues. Lin Miamu could not understand why he was not so kind with her and asked to speak already. Wen replied that he needed something with her. He is to blame for the fact that Chunhua in this battle took the last place, and so it is. Lin Miamu exclaimed that in fact everything was wrong. She watched all the records of the test and he has nothing to do with it. Wen explained that it was he who arranged a fight from Chunhua and Chuntian, and he also destroyed the button. Therefore, they have nothing to do with this. The girl again said that he had nothing to do with it. And even without his intervention, she would be the last. She knew very well what on the test. But even there, she could not control her emotions, whereas she will carry out tasks in real life. Wen thought about her words, and a note of sadness was in his gaze. After hearing the girl, he said that he understood everything and headed towards the sofa. When he crouched on the sofa, he asked that they would eat today because he was hungry and had not eaten anything for several days. Lin Miamu suggested trying her and Ike. The guy asked what she was only thinking about. Then the girl asked why he could not even order food. He received a prize and can treat them with a barbecue. Wen explained that due to the fact that they broke the button, there would be no bonus this month, and he will have to work out again with Courier. Lin Miamu got rid of her chair and asked why he had not told her about it before. The sister began to worry and asked Lin Miao that it had just happened to her. But the girl went to Wen and again asked why he did not say about it. She asked to delay her duty only because she was counting on his award. The guy replied that he was thinking as if she knew about it. The sister asked the guys not to swear, but the girl continued to chase him with his fists. Wen asked the girls whether they were a cute food and, in anticipation of an answer, looked at them. They both replied that without any problems they have nothing to eat. Therefore, even if there would be a sharp one, the guy asked the girls to put something on the table as this dish is too hot. Lin Miamu replied that she had to say about it before, and put some book. She said that it was very good that there were at least books for such a thing. A few days after Wen passed the introductory test, Lin Miao and Van Eyck found a designer who converted the apartment, and also added a little furniture to him. The boy, smiling, said that so far they will be content with this. The next month, when he receives a salary, he will buy something tasty. Van Eyck closed his eyes that it was better to eat home food. Prices in all kinds of restaurants are simply cosmic, Lin Miamu asked, whether even the second lady of the Van family is expensive. The girl replied that she still does not live with her family and money from heaven does not fall, although her sister returned her every time. Lin Miao said that her sister looks very young and asked why she was listening at all. If she had previously joined the association, she would definitely not have been hungry. And why did she agree to that marriage? The girl answered sadly. She had no other choice. Lin Miao, smiling in response, exclaimed that they would no longer about sad and asked to drink better. And then the glasses rang and the guys decided to overturn the glass for health. Each past life of Wen was exhausting and there was not a minute of pleasure in her. Although in this life, due to the appearance of the line of Meomyo, the plan that he invented began to roll downhill. The girls still raised his mood and they were very cute. Wen knocked over another glass thinking about it. He appreciated the whole situation and smiled. The boy decided that in general, everything was pretty good and calmed down from his good thoughts. Lin Miao noticed the gaze of Wen and called him a delicate voice. She blushed a little, blushing at him a sweet look, and asked him to fall in love with him once. The boy asked why she asks about this, and his gaze ceased to be so funny. Lin Miao explained that she was interested in what girls he likes. Wen thought about it and began to eat noodles without ceasing to think. Then the girl came closer to him and asked to tell him as she, in anticipation, Lin Miao, looking at him, said that, for example, he could only like some kind of fool. Wen asked the girl that he decided to eat with her debts. When he did not hear the answer, he was wary of his gaze to the side where the girls were sitting. The boy noticed that they fell asleep. They ran together on the couch, pressing against each other. Wen realized that they had been drunk after several glasses, which was very surprised. He thought that if they do not know how to drink, it would be better not to do it looking at them. The boy went to the couch and asked the girls to wake up more and go to their beds. They did not hear as they slept very tightly, and he decided that they were like a splinter in one place. He talked about the fact that they will be a cold if they sleep here, and you need to sleep a bit and return to the bed. But they slept too tightly, and it looks like they had a little sleeping until the morning. But still, he decided to take them because here they can really freeze. When he picked up Lin Maomyo, she began to say to herself that her stomach hurts very much. Xiaowen replied that it seems she had drunk a lot. Therefore, she had a stomach and hurts. He carried her to the room, and putting her on the bed, he began to cover with a blanket so that she was warm. But unexpectedly, the girl grabbed him by the neck and said that she really wanted water. She pulled him to her, and he asked that she was doing a little scared. The boy understood, looking at the girl that she was still sleeping and hugged space in a dream. She again pulled Xiaowen to her and said that she really wanted water. Then the boy answered Lin Maomyo that he would bring her to drink now and went out. He went out of the door, slammed her, and the girl continued to sleep in not very good condition. Meanwhile, the boy returned to the room to Van Eyck. She also continued to sleep. Xiaowen decided, looking at the girl, that she also needed to be attributed to the room as soon as possible. The boy took carefully the girl in his arms and began to take it out of the room into the corridor. She also slept very nicely, and a delicate pink blush glowed on her cheeks. He carried Van Eyck through the corridor into her room and also laid it on the bed. Xiaowen sighed heavily and decided that he had to bring water for Lin Mai Miao. But suddenly he was very surprised, and his gaze fell on the girl who was sitting in front of him. He could not understand why she was here. Then the girl looked at him that he had two drunken and defenseless women in front of him, and he did not even regain them. She considered him a very unusual guy, as she was very surprised at this. The girl began to tell that initially her sister herself escaped and met him by chance. But now he abducted her, and she is interested in whether he takes too much he takes on himself. Xiaowen replied that she was already an adult if she did not want to get married. Then what was left for him to do? The girl explained that her sister was beautiful, like a petal who had not yet bloomed. If you plant this petal in the wrong pot, then it will dry out sooner or later. Xiaowen, looking at the girl, asked if she was getting pleasure, taming others. Then she asked if she was thinking that she was unfair to her forcing her to marry a family member of Wuyan. Like the daughter of the Van family, she enjoyed the luxurious life that the Van family provided to her, and now she must somehow repay her family. Xiaowen asked if she was enjoying a luxurious life that her family provides her. And why does she decide the fate of her sister if it was born first, or believes that he can accomplish the fate of another person? When he said this, the girl's gaze changed. She explained that since childhood she has no talent for hypnosis, and at 20 with a small she is only the 3rd level. Does he think that it would be normal she would get married? And another was headed by another. Xiaowen, after hearing the girl, looked strictly into her eyes and said that let her decide what to do. Suddenly, the door to the room began to open, and Van Eyck appeared on the threshold. She looked sadly at the girl and told her sister that she did not expect to see her here. Then the sister, looking at her, asked if she was sleeping, and she thought that judging by the expression of her face, she should have heard what she said. The girl decided that Xiaowen was to blame for everything. Van Eyck explained that she wanted to drink, and she woke up and asked whether she came to take her back. The sister looked in response to Van Eyck's eyes and replied that she understood her correctly. Xiaowen poked a finger at Van Eyhan and asked her not to forget where she was. Ike will not go anywhere with her and she can forget about it. Vanihana immediately got up and looked at him, exclaimed that he would not provoke her. Looking into her eyes, she said that this was the work of her family and did not need to climb into her own business. Xiaowen asked the girl to get out of here. Vanihana told the guy that they could even argue that she herself would return to the family. Xiaowen looked strictly into her eyes and moved his eyebrows to her nose, thinking he did not tell her anything. Vanihana told her sister, so that she would not forget that she would get married soon. She explained to her sister that she owed all her family and headed for the exit. Van Eyck sadly thought about her words and lowered her head down, being very upset. Meanwhile, Xiaowen was seriously angry and squeezed his teeth to Van Eyck. He asked her not to worry about what her sister said and just stay here. The girl immediately thanked the guy and said that she would go to bed, wished him good night. Xiaowen could not understand one thing, why he was angry when this is not his business at all. He thought that he probably should not be so hot and still decided that he should be all the same. And then a bright sunny morning came. Before us is a wide and spacious association. Xiaowen approached a parked moped and said that he had paid 200 to repair him. He talked with his motorcycle and asked him to no longer brake. before he had time to finish with a piece of iron as his comrade turned out to be behind him and greeted him. Looking at Xiaovan, he asked if they would go with him. They hardly talked during the test, and he is interested in whether he wants to continue to work as a courier in the future. Xiaowen replied that of course he wanted, and the guy asked what area he usually delivered. Xiaowen replied closer to the house. The guy thought he was too strange since yesterday when the results were announced. He looked at him all the time. Yanjia told the guy that after the strike of Chuntian and Chunhua, he looks absolutely normal and there is not even a bruise. Xiaowen replied that he was quickly recovering, for what Yuanjie said that it was very impressive. Xiaowen decided to stay away from him. Yanjia said that the other day everyone presented their abilities and only he remained. Xiaowen closed his eyes, smiled, and replied that he had a spiritual ability. The boy asked what he meant about spiritual ability. Suddenly, he felt something and threw a despicable look somewhere to the side. He put his hand forward, and there was a strong blue flash in the form of lightning. There was a powerful explosion, and a pillar of bright fire in the form of lightning flew in the direction where he directed him. It was a whole whirlpool in the form of a tornado, and he mixed with lightning together. Xiaowen, looking at what was happening, realized that the boy had just swallowed the zipper. They both looked at what Yuanjia just did. The boy knew what he was doing. He grimaced in an evil grin and said Xin Tiansen that he had finally appeared. A guy who spread his arms to the sides began to come out of the spatial whirlpool. He asked Li Yuanjia to die for his sins, and called him the young master of the Wan family. The guy in response asked for what kind of sins he should die. He did not let go of his hand, and she glowed with bright blue fire in the form of lightning. Yuanjia, looking at his opponent, exclaimed that it was obvious all because of him. Then the guy replied that he had killed only his sister, and was it necessary to kill all his brothers in response? In addition, he simply did his work, and a man turned to him, that's all. Yuanjia did not stop being angry, and asked who gave him this order. But the enemy decided not to answer, and grimacing asked him who knows about it at all. The boy continued to put pressure on him and asked to tell immediately. The enemy exclaimed, squeezing his teeth, that he went too far and looked at him maliciously. In front of him appeared blue in the form of a circle of the portal to which he had just approached. Everything around glowed with bright blue rays, and the guy was quietly standing nearby. The rays began to spin, mixed up with blue lightning, as if in a whirlpool. Yuanjia was very surprised and carefully looked at his enemy. Xiaowen headed aside as he decided that this was not his business, and it had nothing to do with him. He decided that he would not mix in this matter. But I thought that it was somehow not good. Their battle looks like some kind of fantasy film, and he was very interested. His opponent was enough, and he watched what was happening. Xiaowen said that Yuanjia was unlucky, and his enemy's abilities are ideally suited against lightning. The enemy had already called Yuanjia villain, because he thought that he was even strong, since he could kill all his brothers. He began to swing his feet and exclaimed that he did not think that he was such a weakling. He put his strong fist in front of him, and went towards his enemy. He inflicted the strongest blow to Yuanjia so that he flew far back and streams of blood sprayed from his mouth. The guy hit his back very hard, and the fragments of the glass scattered in different directions. He flew through the room back after such a powerful and crushing blow. The enemy approached him and asked how this happened. Xiaowen thought why he was here, and decided that he could not just stand and watch Yuanjia killed before his eyes. His sister seems to have died a terrible death, and he is like a good guy. So thought about him, Xiaowen, not knowing what to do, help a comrade or not. Meanwhile, the enemy again clenched his fist and began to approach the guy. When he wanted to hit him, Yuanjia grabbed his fist in his strong hand. Then the enemy, smiling, said that he seemed to be able to do something. Yuanjia did not know what to do, since his attacks were completely ineffective against him. The enemy again wanted to hit the guy, and waved his foot, lifting her up. Yuanjia again focused all his forces in his hand, and she lit up with bright purple lightning. He raised his hand up and directed her right towards the enemy. Die with a cry. Bright rays almost reached him. The enemy began to dodge very cleverly. He smiled maliciously again and called the kid a failed fool. A bright flash continued to spin near this guy, but nothing happened. The enemy exclaimed, spreading his hands to the side, that it was all useless. He went to Yuanjia and asked just to give up, as he had no way out. The boy stood with his eyes closed as if meditating, and bright blue light glowed around him. Suddenly he opened his eyes as if something happened in his body. He completely lit up with blue lightning and folded two fists together. He began to scream, spreading his hands to the sides, and his eyes lit up with a white void. The enemy asked if he decided to use an electric shock to strengthen his own flesh, and again called him a fool. Yuanjia began to ask again who was the person who gave him an order for his sister. He was very serious. Then the enemy asked why the dead man this information. He smiled at that he still could not defeat him since he was much stronger. He continued to stand calmly, even when bright lightning approached his face. There was a strong explosion after a powerful blow by Yuanjie, and the enemy flew away far back. The boy grabbed his elbow with his hand and looked towards his enemy. He really hit his enemy, and from the mouth of the guy began to drain streams of scarlet blood. He asked the guy daring to beat him in the face, and whether he knew at least how much money he spent on his beautiful face. The enemy became angry to approach Yuanjie to strike. He decided to attack the boy and was already nearby, but Yuanjie made another blow. This blow was even stronger than the previous one, and the enemy took his hands for blood bleeding. He fell to his knees and began to hark the blood, being very surprised at such a turn of events. The guy began to rise from his knees and asked what was happening. He did not expect such a powerful blow by Yuanjie, and his gaze was no longer so confident. The boy stood in front of him and did not stop glowing with bright blue lightning. He was very angry and again asked his opponent who was and who directed him. He pressed him and asked to immediately tell him as he was ready to kill him. He was ready to kill this scoundrel if he did not tell who hired him. He hit him with all his might and he flew off with his back against the stones. Yuanjie asked to answer him immediately. The boy wanted to take revenge on his sister, so he did not vouch for what was happening in his soul now. But the enemy also struck him with a very strong blow and a lot of blood sprayed around. Yuanjie was a little broken and fell to his knees, began to cough and spit blood. He grabbed his heart with his hand and could not rise to his feet since the blow was too strong. His enemy laughed maliciously with his teeth squeezing. Flicks of scarlet blood also flowed from his mouth. He said, looking at the guy, that everything happened faster than he thought. He grabbed Yuanjie with his hand by the hair and pulled to him, lifting. He said, looking at him, that every cell of his body was experiencing a burning sensation and asked him to After their struggle and the strongest explosion, clubs of thick white smoke rose upward. The enemy, when Yuanjie raised him by the hair, let him go down and he fell to the ground exhausted. He too was battered and sighed heavily. Said that he had delivered a lot of trouble to him. He came closer to him and asked how he managed to injure him at all. He only recently looked at him with such furious eyes, and that now, can he open them? In the last minutes, his sister looked at him and his brothers with such sad eyes. She cried and screamed not to kill her. The enemy approached the guy's face that she was very beautiful, and she and his brothers could not restrain herself. Xiaowen, meanwhile, stood somewhere to the side of thinking about something and looking in front of him. Suddenly his gaze fell on the moped in the basket of which the phone rang. He began to lift the towel to see what was under him there. In the pocket of the guy who just figured out Yuanjie, he vibrated the phone. He was asked not to linger near the association and ended as soon as possible to leave. The guy understood the team and replied that he would do his gaze down. He stood thoughtful and closing his eyes, a little sad. He asked to blame this family Yuanjie, not him, since he understood who directed him. But the boy did not have time to find out the whole truth and lay facing his face up. The enemy raised his leg over his head and decided to send him to his sister. But suddenly, Comrade Yuanjie grabbed him by the leg and tried to push the boot from the guy's head. There was a strong explosion and stones scattered around after the coup. The enemy was very surprised and looked with interest at the one who dared to just hit him. Xiaowen approached him and asked if he had seen his keys. The enemy could not understand where this guy came from, and he so easily blocked his blow. He asked who he was. Xiaowen replied that he was looking for the keys to the moped, and it seems he had lost them somewhere here. But the enemy did not stop, and again began to ask who he was and what he needed from him. Then the guy again asked if he had just said to him that he was looking for the keys. The guy said that he remembers him, and he was just with Yuanjie. He asked if he was a friend of this guy. Xiaowen asked him to say quieter, since they were yelling too here very loudly, and will soon come from the association. He does not want to be seen here at all. The enemy thought that he was not at all scared, and this guy looks very weak. He clenched his fist and noticed that the guy did not have the muscles that inspired him. Xiaowen said that he was right, and keys to that guy, after which he approached him. Then the enemy began to run up to him and exclaimed that he was still who he and he only bothers him. When he ran to Xiaowen, he did not have time to hit him, and the first slap in the face walked over his face. He was very surprised, as he did not think that this guy would be so dexterous. He did not expect him to dare to hit him, and looked at him with an evil look. Xiaowen said again that he had already told him to say a little quieter. Xin Tiansen squeezed his teeth and approached him that he would finish him off now. But before he had time to finish, as Xiaowen again hit his palm with all his might in the face, he again asked him to stop yelling and said that he would better obey the elders. Xin Tiansen was simply shocked by his impudence, and from his blows he fell to his knees. Now, in front of the Xiao, we were already lying two guys, one face up, the second face down. Xiaowen looked at the second that he was rather strong and withstood so many bloopers. He went to the guy and approached his hand. He felt the pulse of his comrade. Xiaowen was very strange, and looking at him exclaimed that everything was wonderful. This is confirmed by the fact that it was Yuan Jie who defeated this guy. Suddenly, he heard approaching steps and looked a little alerted to the side. Xiaowen realized that the association arrived just in time, just as he finished. The guy reacted very quickly and began to sweep all the traces of running away. The association has already approached these two guys who lay on the ground like corpses. The guys asked to enclose this site. Xiaowen washed off in time and began to approach the door. He thoughtfully walked back and forth around the room after what had just happened. Behind the wall was some guy who was thinking that he saw everything. He saw how Xiaowen Jadachina filled up such a powerful criminal. People began to approach and be interested in what happened here. And is it really a symbol of victory? This is by chance not Yuan Jie, who was undergoing a test in the intelligence detachment. The guys were very surprised when Xin Tianxin saw next to him. This is an wanted criminal of the 5th level. The military detachment hunted him for more than a month, and unexpectedly that the newcomer overcame him. Each time they have more and more newcomers, the man asked for an ambulance sooner. It is also necessary to report that here the offender of which must be interrogated. The man asked Liu Kai why he was here. The boy grabbed his head by the head without knowing what to answer. Suddenly he shouted that he saw him. Some guy defeated Xin Tianxin. He had a headdress from floral fabric. Then the guys asked who it was, and asked if he was not from the association. Liu Kai asked to go with him because he saw where that guy went. He does not think that he has gone far. The man exclaimed that he was directly into a dead end. But Liu Kai said that he definitely went here. It was so cool, and it should be the 5th level, or even 6th level. Suddenly the guy looked in front of him, surprised that the wall was in front of him and there was no that guy. He squeezed his hands, inquiring where he went to fly away from here. The man asked to return to the association. The intelligence, meanwhile, would investigate this incident. He explained that there is still a lot of work here. Liu Kai sadly lowered his head down. Then he raised his head up and asked who in the end this guy was calling him the hero of his heart. He decided that he had to immediately find him and ask him to sign on a t-shirt. Meanwhile, the guy's boss opened the door to the ward of Yuan Jie and asked Li alive. Yanjia noticed the boss, who also came to her and looked at the girl. She asked how it happened that he now became like a mummy. The boy explained to the girl that it was his enemy, and he was ready to die, but to kill him. The girl said that she did not want to hear excuses. During the introductory briefing, everything was clearly explained to them. In a clash with the criminal, it is necessary to first report to the association and not try to eliminate it yourself. The boy did not know what to answer the girl. She asked if an introductory briefing for him was not a fairy tale. Then I asked Yuan Jie when he wanted to get up better not to move, or then he could not walk at all. But he was able to catch Xin Tianxin, so no one will punish him. Well, if in the future it is again blurring, then it may no longer even come. Yanjia said that he did not even understand why Xin Tianxin is twice as much as he before. Last time, he seriously wounded him, but he was able to escape. So in just 1 month, he completely recovered and became much stronger. The girl replied that she would interrogate him when he would wake up and he should not worry about such things. Yuanjia asked how Xiaowen feels, and he said that he was next to him at that time. And that then happened. He did not remember anything. The girl replied that he was in order and first reported to her. She asked if someone else was nearby. Yuanjia answered, looking at the ceiling, that he did not know this. Then the girl asked him to recover and report to the association when she recovers. Yuanjia wanted to say something about her enemy, but the girl interrupted him. She explained that his Yuan family is also investigating what happened, and she hopes that in the future he will not act so impulsively. She promises that she will tell him about everything as soon as she has information, but the association can prohibit it. Having said this, the girl headed for the exit from the ward. She closed the door behind her and saw Xiao Van near the door. He stood leaning against the wall. The boy asked the girl whether she could walk in the future. Then she approached him and crossed her arms crossed on her chest if he helped Yuan Jie. Xiaowen inquired in a cool pose. He put that guy. Before us is a large building of the hospital, namely a green, wide courtyard. Xiaowen asked Lin Maumyo why she was so worried. He asked whether Yuan Jie told her something and handed the girl a great tasty ice cream. Lin Miamu replied that he told her as if he had recently seriously wounded Xin Tianxin, and in less than a month he not only healed but also became stronger than before. Xiaowen asked how he could seriously injure him, because even in the usual state he could not compare with Tianxin. Lin Miamu answered the guy that in his place she would also be beside herself with anger. The girl began to tell Xiao Vanya what happened more than 2 months ago. She explained that his sister died a terrible death in her own yard. The Yuan family is one of the 3 leading families of the Lei Union, and his sister Yuan Sujin is the chairman of the Lei Union. The girl told the guy that he was better off to go inside when it was raining on the street. Inexplicably, she died in her own yard, and it was just terrible. Before her death, she was brutally raped by several men. Lin Mei Miao explained to the guy that after the death of her sister, Yuan Jie became revenge. Having lost the support of the family, the Yuan family began to weaken every day. Sad fate, of course. When the girl turned towards the guy, she was very angry as he was sleeping. She exclaimed that she was telling a heartbreaking story here, and he simply took and fell asleep. When he woke up, Xiao Wen replied that he did not know why, but for some reason he really wants to sleep. Lin Miamu asked if he really did not hear that she had just told him. The boy answered the girl that he had heard everything and noticed that he had lost his ice cream. He became interested in whether Yuan Suzhen was a weak girl, and he began to lick ice cream from his fingers. Lin Mei Miao explained to the guy that his sister was 6th level. Xiao Wen said that it was very strange, and asked Yuan Jie that he seriously wounded Xin Tianxin more than a month ago. But he is only the 5th level, and how then they were able to kill his sister? Lin Mei Miao replied that that was why she said that she inexplicably died in her own yard, and whether he had heard her at all. Xiao Wen replied that he had heard, and very strangely, because someone can conduct experiments in public. The girl looked at the guy and answered that the probability of this was very high. Xiao Wen said that he witnessed how Yuan Jie struck himself with electric shock, thus receiving over the explosive force. He asked if she had any information about the Yuan family. Lin Miamu replied that among all families with the elements of the imbalance, only the Yuan family can do that. The association believes that this increase in force relate to the special ability of the Yuan family. Xiao Wen said that perhaps they hunt not so much for their family as for this ability. The girl said that it was. The villains learned about this ability, but the Yuan family refused to cooperate, and then they responded. Xiao Wen said that this is just their assumption that could correspond to the evidence currently, but does not prove that they are experiments on people. Lin Miyamoyo said that when Xin Tianxin wakes up, she will personally interrogate him. Xiao Wen asked what she was talking about. The girl replied that he always did not like to intervene in the affairs of people and why he was so worried about the Yuan family. The boy said that gossip is human nature and he is simply curious, nothing more. Lin Mei Miao blushed her eyes a little and decided to show him something. She brought the phone to Xiao Vanya. The boy asked what he took the phone in his hands. He asked if this was gossip about people with abilities, and why did he need it. Lin Miyamoyo explained that he is now on this forum a great celebrity. The boy began to read the correspondence, and the girl asked him not that brother with a headdress. Xiao Wen asked if the child painted it and considered the drawing too ugly, and it seemed to her painted perfectly and looks like him. Xiao Wen exclaimed that he does not care because no one would recognize him from this drawing. It's good that he quickly ran away, otherwise others could see him. Lin Miyamoyo said that this Li Kai was at the crime scene and clearly saw him, so that he would not be behind now. Fortunately, she considers his testimony and will help keep everything secret. The boy told the girl that he had met him on the street several times, and apparently he lives in his area. He got up from the bench and said Lin Miyamoyo that he went to deliver orders. The girl asked in surprise. She was going to work as a courier, to which Xiao Wen replied that the food would not buy itself. There will be no bonuses this month, so you will have to work again with a courier. Lin Mai Miao listened to him, answered the phone, and asked what happened. The girl was explained that Xin Tianxin disappeared, and her gaze immediately changed. The day was very bright, and Xiao Wen exclaimed that there was nothing surprising. Lin Mai Miao asked why he was not surprised, and it felt like he knew about it in advance. The boy replied that this is an ordinary plot when a villain disappears at a critical moment with some secret. Does this mean that something is really wrong with Xin Tianxin? He has in mind something else except murders? The girl suddenly got up Slavka and asked the boy to go to the association with her. Xiao Wen replied that he did not have time, and he needs to finish 5 orders today. Lin Miamu was immediately upset and asked if he was joking now. Xiao Wen, strictly looking into the girl's eyes, replied that he was serious and was obliged to deliver all these orders to the address. Turning around, the boy said goodbye to the girl, and she began to stop him. Lin Mai Miao exclaimed a kick with her feet that she was simply furious. She was very angry and asked that it was with him at all. Then she fell on the grass and grabbed her hands by the leg, as she was very painful. Meanwhile, on the street there was a colorful bright money, and high-rise buildings rose as if to the sky. Lin Mei Miao stayed with her thoughts and was already inside the association building. She asked how someone could disappear from the association moving along the corridor. She gave the command to unhook the building of the association, and asked whether they checked the video surveillance system on all floors. The girl with a notebook in her hands replied that there was nothing suspicious in any video. She was the secretary of Lin Mei Miao of the 4th level with the skill of instant amnesia. The girl explained that he simply disappeared without leaving a trace. Maybe the surveillance cameras were hacked, which was interesting to Lin Mei. The secretary explained to his boss that they were already checked by a person from the technical department. She looked at the girl and replied that they were all right. Lin Mei Miao, looking at her, asked how then he could escape. If only someone did not use spatial abilities. She told her secretary that she needed a list of people in associations with spatial abilities. Then the secretary asked if she did not suspect that there was a spy in their association. Lin Mei Miao, looking at the girl, said that she was not advised with her, but she just should follow her decree. Then the secretary tilted her head to her boss and replied that she was listening to her. Lin Mei Miao thought that as soon as she left, he disappeared, and this is very strange. The employee also wanted to say something, but he did not even have time to open his mouth. The boss got angry and asked whether they saw his disappearance with their own eyes. The man said that he only looked down, raised his head, and Xin Tianxin had already disappeared. The second employee confirmed these words and said that he disappeared in a split second. Someone was waiting for the moment while they turned away and he washed off. Lin Mei Miao looked at them strictly. She crossed her hands on her chest and asked to give her all the notes from the surveillance cameras. Lin Mei Miao went into another office and saw her sister sitting at the table. She turned her head in her direction and asked whether her sister returned. Ike asked her sister how Yuan Jie was doing there. Lin Mei Miao took her hand behind her head. She crouched on the sofa and replied that everything was fine, but so far she was not at all up to him. Ike asked her sister what happened since she noticed that she had a very good mood. Lin Mei Miao, throwing her eyes very exciting, explained that Xin Tianxin had disappeared. Ike was also very surprised and asked how this is possible because this is an association. Has someone specially freed him? Lin Miamu replied that it is quite possible, and that she was most annoyed by the fact that he disappeared under the observation of the intelligence detachment, and again she would be to blame for this. Ike handed her sister a card and said that someone put her on the door. She entered to see the data, but as soon as she opened the door, she fell to the floor. She examined her for half a day and could not find anything special, like this is an ordinary card. Lin Miamu took her in her hands and said that she had a symbol of the triangle, sometimes meaning warning. Ike was worried and asked if the disappearance of Xin Tianxin could be connected with this card. But how can it be that this card appeared approximately at the time when Xin Tianxin disappeared? The sister answered in a very serious tone that everything that is connected with him is very strange. Initially, she thought that Xin Tianxin could ask about the Yuan family, but he escaped. Ike, lowering her gaze, said that before she entered, she just finished reading Yuan's family, and she was too sorry for this guy. If he also finds out that Xin Tianxin escaped, then he will be very upset. Lin Miamu replied that they should find Xin Tianxin before Yuanji will be discharged from the hospital. As for this card that her sister brought her, she will send her for verification. Ike thought about lowering her head down and immediately grunted, after which she started up. She asked her sister whether she saw that post about a brother with a headdress of floral fabric. Now everyone talks about him, and even a group of people who are looking for him all the time appeared. Lin Miamu suddenly got up from the couch and came very close to her sister. She leaned toward her ear and explained that her brother with a headdress made of floral fabric is Xiao Wen. Ike was very surprised and her gaze changed. She clenched her fists, and eyes began to get out of the orbits from such a strong surprise. Lin Mei Miao went to her sister again and asked her to be a little quieter. The girl could not recover when she recognized such a shocking news. Meanwhile, Xiao Wen was already in the room and was ready to deliver orders. The man sat behind the bar and held his hand at his head. He asked the guy if he had quit, since Xiao Wen had not come for several days. Xiao Wen answered the man that he had not quit, just recently found another half-time work. He said goodbye and said that he was going to go to transport. The man wished him good luck. He thought that the guy was just well done. It will be necessary to somehow introduce him to that person. And now Xiao Wen has already approached his moped and went to transport orders. Suddenly, people began to raise their heads up into the sky, and he also became interested in what was there. He was wondering why these people were all looking at heaven, and he also decided to look. The boy raised his head up and was simply surprised when he saw strange flying devices above his head. What is this for this? And really, he could not understand the spaceships. These devices really looked like huge spaceships. He began to look at them more carefully and thought that on one of them there was an alien. Something reminded him and he thought, The boy decided to learn how to do so that people did not die. He began to go even faster on his moped and decided that it was an alien invasion. A group of people just solved the question of whether such an association was responsible. And is there a spaceship in front of them? If we are talking about an alien invasion, then they do not need to take any action. They expect notifications from the Ministry of Defense. This said Ninye, secretary of the logistics department. Spaceships continued to fly, and suddenly one of them released a fiery salvo. The fire beam hit the houses directly, and a strong explosion occurred, and the conflagration was burning around. People realized that this is definitely an enemy, and they need to be very careful. A misfortune to Earth came to their city. The guy in glasses told his brother that the situation is not the best, and they opened fire on ordinary people. Will they really wait for the notification? And he asks at least to help people. Ninye was the head of the logistics department. After a little thought, he asked to place the cleansing department in the need to act together with other departments of the country. The guy got up from his chair and said, clutching his fists, that it was time to report the top. The guys grouped and headed down the corridor forward. Ninye asked his brother to go with him. And so he and his brother had already arrived in the room in which the gray-haired old man was located. When they went, the old man got up from his chair and greeted right away with the guys. On other chairs, warriors who gathered at a meeting were already sitting. There was Van Jinyan, vice president of the association, who was a very strict and mustachioed man. Also, there was a serious man in Swantian, vice president of the association, Yue Hanbin, vice president of the association, and also a guy who looked very strange. Bao Tao is also a vice president of the association. The gray-haired old man was called So Echinji, and he was the president of the association. The old man said, looking at his comrades, that there was still no time to do anything. Ninye explained to the president that they were attacking civilians. They, as a branch of the public security department, must immediately join the battle. But the old man explained to the guys that they should wait for the instructions of the Ministry of Defense. The boy began to be indignant and said that while they were waiting, a huge number of innocent people would die. Xuan Tian exclaimed that the invaders had an unknown power. It is not the fact that their abilities will be able to hurt them at all, and this is not within their competence. That is why they are only required to wait. Ninye too began to resent in response, and asked how they could not help people, but to sit and wait. Bao Tao sat lounging on the couch and holding his head with his hand that he had no idea, and let them decide for themselves. Yue Hanbin said that they could not even help people without permission. They are state organizations and are obliged to wait for instructions for higher bodies. Van Zhangyan began to be indignant and asked why they were all so afraid. Spit on weapons, and he is not even afraid of nuclear bombs. The president seriously looked at the guys and asked him to give him time to think over everything. Van Zhangyan turned towards the gray-haired old man and wanted to say something to the master. Ninye unexpectedly interrupted them and exclaimed that then he would help being ordinary civilian. The president immediately asked him to stop, and then Brother Ninye bowed to him and said that they would wait for his decision. And so the morning came sunny and clear. After the attack of the aliens, there were a lot of devastation. Xiaowen, meanwhile, was traveling on a moped and began to drive up to a certain area. He was in the Juxiovine area and looked at the smoke that swirled right in front of him. He became very sad for the fact that unknown aliens who invaded their land were being created. He stopped, and tears from his moped, looking up at the flying ships. Meanwhile, a girl with long hair and in a long dress stood in the middle of the ship. She looked at the man who was sitting in a chair in front of her and tried to stand quietly. The guy, meanwhile, echoed food for both cheeks and thought about something of his own, after which he looked at the girl. He looked at her with a strict look and asked what result. The girl in glasses explained to the guy that the test data did not reach 100%. Then the guy stopped eating and smiling replied that it was something new. He became very interesting and he broke through a wide smile again thinking about it. The guy looked with his surprised eyes and exclaimed that this planet should be fun. On the street, puffs of smoke towered to the sky itself so that it was even difficult to breathe. Xiaowen again put on his head his handkerchief in a flower and said that he would hold on his dense working schedule. He clenched his fists and exclaimed that it was his hardly earned calm life. The boy decided to go through the puffs of smoke and fragments since this is his 80-year-old pension. He moved his eyebrows to his nose and began to make his way through the explosions and pillars of smoke. A new explosion occurred, and the earth scattered around, dropping its pieces and fragments of stones. Suddenly, a man who called him his idol began to approach the guy. He caught up with the guy and rushed into his arms that was accidentally filling him to the ground. He said that he had finally found him and called him his idol, or even God. He called the boy the god of hats. Xiaowen grabbed his head with his hands and asked who he was like that. and apparently he was mistaken. But the guy began to cry without letting go of his leg and said that he was definitely not mistaken. He again called him his god and his tears sparkled in his eyes. He is the god of hats, their father, the savior of the world, the universal striking of all creatures, and they love him. He did not stop repeating that they love him and said that the holy light shines for each headgear. The coolest and most powerful is, he is the god of hats. Everyone needs to be lined up in a row and not crowd so that everyone can give their love to the god of hats. The guy continued to repeat this and blushing his gaze into the sky without letting go of the leg of Xiao Van. But the guy in response called him the sick and asked him to immediately dump him, kicking him with his foot. The guy replied that as soon as an explosion occurred here, he immediately guessed that he should be here. And even if he does not think to deny it because he sued for work in a marketing company. If he works with him, he will make him the most popular. Xiaowen thought about it. The guy smiled and exclaimed that he was telling the truth and he would be popular #1. Suddenly, Xiaowen hit him with his palm in his face with the use of physical amnesia in the form of a strong blow with his right hand. The boy explained when he was leaving that in his dictionary there was no #1, and turning around to the moped. Suddenly Ike appeared in front of him and looking at the guy, she asked how this happened. Xiaowen waved her hand and exclaimed that she was just in time. He asked to hurry and help him to hypnotize this guy. He explained to the girl, being very upset that this guy seemed to recognize him. Ike covered her mouth with her hand and called him the god of hats. And he really knows her. Xiaowen, smiling, looked at the girl and explained Van Eyck, who he really was. Meanwhile, on the ship, the guy continued to sit on his chair with his legs spread on the table. The girl told Brother San that they had just discovered someone strong at the point of the explosion. But suddenly he disappeared again. Sanya began to scream and asked him to bring him his cyclotron accelerated reactive gun of Armstrong. A huge, powerful gun of incredible sizes appeared in front of him immediately. The guy prepared in order to shoot and smiled maliciously, wanting to tear everyone into pieces. And then the first salvo flew out of this ship of aliens and flew towards the opponents. Xiaowen noticed a danger that approached him faster and faster. He immediately took his comrades one by one hand and pulled the other to him. He made an incredible maneuver and saddled a salvo that was just put in his direction. He managed to take his friends from danger, and a strong explosion occurred, such that the earth was scattered around. The man from the crowd exclaimed that the enemy began the attack again and maybe wait already. These were people from the association, and they said that this is not what ordinary people could deal with. Did the president still have not given the order? Suddenly, one of them pointed to the monitor and asked the others to see, as he saw the survivor. The guys were very surprised and began to look at the monitor, a little blushing. Xiaowen held two people, taking them out of a very thick gray smoke. Finally, he got out of there and a flower-bright bandage shone on his head. He was a hero for everyone and saved his comrades from a powerful, strongest explosion. Xiaowen seriously squeezed his fists, and looking at the girl exclaimed that there was no end. Van Eyck looked at the guy's pants and told him that his leg was torn. Xiaowen answered the girl that there is just a human organ and should not panic. Van Eyck was in earnest and looked away to the side, so as not to look where it was not necessary. Xiaowen was angry because of another, as he noticed that the aliens destroyed his house. They also insolently burned his leg and wanted to break his life. He clenched his fists and, crouching on his knees, decided that now he would not be mercy. Xiaowen looked into the sky and exclaimed that today or he would destroy them, or they were him. He looked into the sky and shouted it in anticipation of some answer. But there were no spaceships over his head. The sun shone as usual. Xiaowen continued to look up in the sun glowing above his head. The ship seemed to be not in the sky a few minutes ago. The boy could not understand how they could disappear so quickly. So their level of technology is much higher than that of this planet. He clenched his teeth with anger and rage as he really wanted to take revenge. But it was still necessary to find them. The boy called them perverts, leaving the thick gray puffs of smoke into the light of white. He clicked with 2 fingers, and a bright flash of scattering smoke occurred. He lit up in bright yellow rays, being a hero for a girl, and for his adherent who called him an idol. Xiaowen decided that it would be better, and the girl exclaimed, closing her eyes, which was too bright. Meanwhile, the guy who called him the idol began to open his eyes. When he came to his senses, he immediately cast his gaze towards Xiao Van. He seemed to see a god in front of him. The guy again called him the god of hats, holding out his hand to him. When Xiaowen cut him again, he said that this guy needed a strong dose of hypnosis, otherwise sooner or later he would remember what he did. And this is really a problem. The girl slowly opened her eyes to leave it to her. The light was very strong and she barely opened her eyes. The guys from the association were already approaching thick smoke. and one of them exclaimed that the explosion center was strong and necessary to go check. It is necessary to carefully look around if there are survivors and quickly call the team of doctors. Xiaowen noticed that they arrived very quickly. He decided that if they see him, then tomorrow he would fall into the headlines of newspapers. But he does not need this. The boy grabbed the girl by the neck and dragged more from this place. They rinked very quickly and only clubs of white, thick smoke remained in their place. Meanwhile, the group had already come running and made his way to where the guys had just been. They found only a guy who lay on the ground with a satisfied look. Meanwhile, Lin Mei Miao sat on an armchair with a telephone in her hands, about something thinking. She looked at the phone being very serious. Suddenly it seemed to her that someone had appeared in the room, and she was a little alert. Bright light shone in the room and she got up from the chair, asked who it was. The light was too bright and the girl did not know how to react to this, a little scared. She was very surprised when she saw in front of her Xiaowan and her sister Van Eyck. The girl explained to the boy and her sister that his appearance was too unexpected. Van Eyck explained to her sister that their house was bombed and asked where they would now spend the night. Lin Miamu answered, "Then she already knows everything." Xiaowen was surprised that the girl even prepared new pants for him. Lin Miamu exclaimed that all the surveillance cameras of associations burned from its light from the lower body. Fortunately, he was in a scarf, otherwise everyone would have recognized him. Xiaowen, holding his head, explained that he was by chance, and asked today to go to his parents because it was not far from here. He thought that in the end he collected money from them for living, and now he must return it. But he had no money. On the street it was already dark and bright lights of light burned in the houses. Girls began to approach the house, because it was necessary to decide where to spend the night today. The sisters were already next to the big high gate heading in their direction. Uncle Van appeared in the door, a servant of the parents of Xiao Van. He asked whether he finally returned the young master. The boy stood in front of the man looking at him. He asked his parents at home. He explained to his uncle that something had happened, and he would have to live at home with his friends for some time. Uncle Van answered, smiling, that his parents were at home, and it was better not to leave home this time. Xiaowen turned away from the man, said that he was unlikely to be able to stay here for a long time. Meanwhile, the uncle had already informed Mr. and the mistress that the young master had returned. Xu Xian, the guy's father, called him a jerk and asked him how he dared to return. The mother of the guy, Bai Suzhen, blushed, almost wept, and called him a stink. After that, she hugged the boy and clung to her again, called a stink with tears in her eyes. When they saw two girlfriends, they thought about whether it was a problem, or everything is fine. Lin Miamu threw a strict look at them and blushing thought that she had heard everything. If they have a son, the mother thought so, then they will call him Shui Shilin, and if the daughter, then Shu Xiaoxin. This is of course not bad, but what to call the great-grandson and great-grandson? They have already come up with names for their grandchildren, and come up with for great-grandchildren. Mother said that dinner was almost ready and asks to go for now to watch TV in the living room. Father asked Uncle Van to manage that dinner in the kitchen would be prepared as quickly as possible. Xiaowen noticed that his parents had not changed at all. The girls were a little alert when they heard some kind of sound. Lin Mei Miao realized that the father of the guy Shushanhua Gu Baozhi Lin medicine. She remembers his face, and from time to time it falls into the headlines of newspapers. Bai Suzhen headed towards the door and told her son that she would bring something now. Father asked his son and girls what they wanted to smile sweetly for dinner. Xiaowen thought a little and was alert because he was wondering what his mother wanted to bring to him. The woman headed for a certain room and went to the huge iron safe. She took out a golden box from there and smiling said that this day had finally arrived. Xu Xian told the guys that he would go to see what was happening in the kitchen and headed towards the door. Lin Miamu answered him that they understood him, and the man immediately went out the door. He again asked the guys at this time to have fun while he was going to deal with dinner. He closed the door behind him and said, turning to the guys, that he would be soon. Xiaowen tried to let his steam, and Xu Xian was approaching the kitchen door before he could come, as he saw his wife squatting with a sad look. The man went to her and asked whether everything was ready. The woman turned to him and taking out some bag answered, looking angrily, that of course she was ready. She explained to her husband that she had just poured a handful of a whole hand into the ventilation of the house. In less than 10 seconds, everything will begin. After how many years of expectation they will finally have grandchildren. Uncle tried to explain to Mr. and Madam that this is not entirely right. But before he finished how they turned to him and asked what he knew about his parents' love for his children. Then the man immediately began to do what they ordered and turned on the fan immediately. Van Eyck, looking at the plate with red fish, exclaimed that his family was very rich. Lin Miamu also asked if he would inherit the property of his family. Xiaowen replied that his parents were rich. He explained that he did not even finish the kindergarten, and he does not know how to manage the company. Mom and Dad a long time ago made a will that all the property will go to his children, and if he has no children, then they will sacrifice everything. He thought that if he ruled the company, then it may accidentally become the first in the world, and this will be his death. The boy no longer knew looking at her friends, to rejoice or cry. Lin Miyamoyo noticed that his parents were behaving strangely. They only came, and the mother and father have already come up with names for her grandchildren. Van Eyck, lowering her eyes, blushed a little and said that he had a good family and she would also like this. Xiaowen thought that this raised his gaze towards the ceiling. 10 seconds should have passed. Smoke began to leave the ventilation grill. The boy asked the girls to immediately hold their breath. Lin Mei Miao looked up. She closed her mouth with her hand, and covering one eye asked what it was. The countdown began, and only 8 seconds remained. The smoke was already poorly visible. Xiaowen went to Van Eyck and, holding her mouth with his hand, asked not to breathe, because he needed to urgently leave the house. There is already very little left, only 6 seconds. Smoke continued to leave the ventilation hatch. The girls began to get up very slowly and holding his breath. It was necessary to go slowly. There were only 4 seconds remained. Xiaowen squeezed his mouth Van Eyck with his hand and asked that it was with her. Only a few seconds remained and smoke turned from white into purple. Van Eyck pushed the guy and asked to leave here rather, as she felt alarmed. Of course, she did not say this, but asked the guy not to approach him. She was really in a strange state and blushing affectionately asked to move away from her. Xiaowen was a little scared as he realized that it penetrates even through the skin. He exclaimed that his parents spent a whole bunch of money. Van Eyck fell to her knees, heavily sighing. Lin Mei Miao said, looking at her sister, that her abilities were going out of control. She exclaimed that it was too late. If the power of her hypnosis completely gets out of control, then no one can do anything. It will be impossible to even resist. Xiaowen asked Lin Miao that it was with her. The boy asked Van Eyck to try to control herself and not succumb to this power, but the girl, blushing, answered that she could not, and that she should do it now. She explained, standing on all fours, that she did not know what was happening with her body. The boy began to reach out in her direction and said that he would only help her need to trust him. Xiaowen explained that he would try to make her temporarily lost consciousness, and this should help. Van Eyck again began to ask not to touch her because a simple touch can become a problem. But the boy again asked the girl to trust him and smiled a little. He approached her and hugged her immediately. Xiaowen explained her hugging that everything would be fine. There was a bright flash, and purple in the form of lightning began to rise higher and higher. The whole room was shrouded in bright purple light, and the girls were lying on the floor. Meanwhile, parents and Uncle Van stood behind the door. They were waiting. The mother was very worried, and they thought what was happening there and whether everything was in order. Father crossed his arms over his chest and told his wife that she did not seem to her and this is all a phantom. Mother explained that she used her unique secret method and stormy spell. She does not believe that she could not cope with her son. Uncle glanced at Xu Xian and said that this time Xiao Wanya was very lucky. We are talking about phantom, namely about the demons seducing people in dreams and visions. They are the masters of the world of dreams, and can deprive a person of 5 feelings and create a subspace where even God cannot penetrate. The legend says that if a person and a phantom make love, then a person will die. Xiaowen stood in the courtyard on the street next to Lin Maumyo. They looked in front of them. The girl, suddenly throwing her gaze, grunted upward. The boy explained Lin Mei Miao that this is bad and they fell into the illusion. They became very interesting, and they went further along the path through the thicket of the forest. Lin Miamu said that last time he fell into the illusion of Van Yihan. She was wondering how he got out of there. The boy thought about looking forward. He answered the girl that he no longer remembers this. Lin Mei Miao unexpectedly surprised something, and her gaze changed dramatically. She accidentally crashed into the back of Xiao Van directly with her head hitting her. The girl grabbed her nose with her hand and asked why he suddenly stopped. Xiao Wen looked at the girl and asked if she was bored. Lin Mei Miao smiled in response and said that she was unusual. That Xiao Wen, who's she knew she chatting so often. The boy replied that, in any case, they got stuck here, and you need to find what to talk about. Lin Miamu said that she does not hear what he was saying and asking to quickly find Van Eyck. In the end, this is an illusory kingdom, and they should not linger here. Xiao Wen exclaimed that if she would look at the abyss for a long time, then the abyss would also look at her. The girl lowered her gaze down, and said that it was impolite to eavesdrop on other people's thoughts. Xiao Wen replied that she began and deeply inside her such lustful thoughts. Lin Miamu got angry again and asked him to immediately stop talking about it. She pulled the boy to her and said that if he hears them, She asked to forget and not dare to speak. Xiaowen approached the girl, and looking into her eyes that she told him like that, he began to approach her even closer, and she asked him to stop and stop. She promised that if he approaches her yet, then she did not vouch for herself. And she asked not to forget that she was able to step by step to the post of the head of the intelligence detachment, because she does everything that is required of her. The guy turned his back to her, and smiling replied that he believes that she herself was able to do it. He said that he knew the secrets of many people through their own thoughts, but he just tries not to perceive it seriously and think less about it. Xiaowen said that Van Eyck should be right somewhere ahead just where they are going. Lin Miamu got worried and asked not to go there because it was too dangerous there. But the boy replied that if he does not go there, they could not get out of here. Lin Miamu said that in general, the illusion of the third level should not be so strong. Xiaowen said that if it were an illusion of the third level, they would have long been removed from here. Looking in front of him, the boy explained to the girl that she was thinking more than they thought. Meanwhile, an evening has already come that turned into a bright moon and starry night. Xiaowen and Lin Mei Miao went inside the wide room and noticed that the situation had changed since Van Eyck sat in front of them on her knees. Xiaowen said that he did not expect to see such an old castle, and thought there would be something more magnificent. But again, given the modest disposition of Van Eyck, this is understandable. Lin Miamu asked if he was trying to think logically in the illusory space, but in order to destroy the illusion, one logical thinking is not enough. They continued to watch the girl who was on her knees while in the illusion. Lin Mei Miao noticed that Ike woke up. Van Eyck got up from her knees and headed towards the boy and her sister. Lin Mei Miao noticed that it looks like Van Eyck forgot them, and she would not attack them. But how can they defeat her? The girl was already standing opposite them with her arms crossed on her stomach. The boy looked at her that she had already attacked. Lin Miamu threw a questioning look at him, because I did not understand what he meant. The girl held out her hand forward as if she wanted to get something or show. After that, she opened her palm very widely and cutely looked at the guys. Lin Mei Miao was very surprised and asked that this all means at all. Xiaowen explained that she had chosen and chose him, how she thinks that it can mean. Lin Mei Miao was a little scared and exclaimed that she could not be a phantom. Then the boy asked her to see herself, and as if he had opened her veil. Isn't it a phantom in front of them? Van Eyck's eyes shone with a snow, white void. Xiaowen began to approach the girl and said that he would go to help her. But Lin Mei Miao did not really like it, and she tried to stop him. But the girl realized that she needed to save her sister and asked him to be careful. She worried about Xiaovan. The boy turned in her direction, asked not to worry. But Lin Miamu clenched her fists and asked how she could not worry about him in this situation. After all, he knows that a phantom can take his life if something goes wrong. Xiaowen smiled in response to her and exclaimed that there was nothing wrong with death. Lin Miamu was even more surprised by his words, how he may not be afraid of death. The boy was already approaching her sister, who was waiting for him with a smile. She spread her arms and threw in his direction a bunch of beautiful snow-white feathers. After that, the clothes slipped from her and she was completely foot. Van Eyck close to the guy. She pressed her with her whole body being completely exposed and with her hair loose. Xiaowen, when she clung to him, asked if she did not want to not force herself to do this. Van Eyck looked at him in response with a very cute, gentle look and began to hug even tighter. After that, she clung to the boy with her lips and they merged in a passionate kiss. Lin Miamu did not expect this, and her gaze changed, after which she blushed greatly. She asked if everything was fine, and streams of sweat began to drain on her cheeks. Xiaowen, after they kissed, turned towards the sister. Van Eyck pulled away a little, but the boy pressed her to her and asked not to be distracted. Lin Mei Miao was very angry and asked Xiaovan what he was doing. Van Eyck immediately looked at his sister, and he was full of anger and hatred. She waved her hand in her direction and wanted the girl to die. Lin Mei Miao exclaimed that all men are the same. When they see a beautiful woman, they cannot do otherwise. Before she had time to finish, how Van Eyck again waved her hand and a bright purple flame flew in her direction. Lin Mei Miao was very nervous and exclaimed that she was mistaken in his account. Xiaowen tried again to attract a girl to him and asked not to stop, but rather to continue. To himself, he called Lin Maumyo stupid. Van Eyck has already begun to use his abilities to attack the girl. The boy was in earnest and asked her to immediately get out of here. Bright purple light flew towards the girl in the form of lightning. Lin Mei Miao exclaimed that he could not drive her out of here and how he dares to tell her like that. She called him an unscrupulous scoundrel and decided that he was only a third level of something to be afraid of. She was going to not give herself offense, but to try to attack and suddenly stumbled on a stone. A strong explosion occurred nearby and sharp, huge stones scattered in different directions. The girl began to scream as she was very scared, and her sister's gaze was hateful and evil. Xiaowen caught Lin Mao Miao, taking her in his arms in time, not letting him fall. When he took the girl in his arms, he looked into her eyes, inquired if she was a fool. If this attack fell into it, then it would never have been more in reality. Lin Mei Miao lowered her gaze down and, grunting a little red from her act, Van Eyck smiled maliciously and said that anyone who would stand in her way will certainly die. Xiaowen noticed Van Eyck's great power. Lin Mei Miao asked what he did to her. The boy answered, looking at her scornfully, that she was doing not what she needed, and he almost destroyed this illusion. Then the girl asked how he destroyed the illusion of kissing her bumps. Xiaowen answered with sadness that he is now afraid to destroy this illusion will not be easy. Lin Miamu said that he could easily destroy Van Eyck's illusion. And is it really more complicated this time? Xiaowen replied that the illusion is like an unsteady sand, and the stronger she presses on it, the deeper she drowns you. He said that he and Van Eyck are full of each other's opposites. The girl again waved her hand and began to climb out of the floor with sharp green roots. These roots enveloped the girl and began to grow stronger and stronger around the entire perimeter. They had already begun to approach the boy and Lin Miamu. There were a lot of them, and they grew from different angles. Lin Mei Miao, frightened, exclaimed that it looked like she was trying to lure them into a trap. Xiaowen asked the girl not to move, try not to notice these roots. Then she asked if he could not read her thoughts and find a way out of here. Xiaowen replied that he tried. Van Eyck in front of them, and rather like a door, and not thinking of a human being. He explained that reading thoughts on it does not work in any way, and it was very strong. Lin Mei Miao was seriously scared and asked what he had in mind about the door. The boy explained that this means that she would allow this only to trusted people. If she resists, then the girl will see the enemy in her. Lin Miamu, in fright, asked what would happen if he was wrong and tried to follow his advice. Xiaowen said that in any case, it was too late to worry about it, and he was not used to dying. Lin Mei Miao told the guy that she had not yet bought herself new leather boots and did not want to die. Van Eyck continued to stand with an empty gaze, completely shrouded in the roots of the trees. The girl looked in front of her and directed all these roots against her opponents, and they completely enveloped them in the form of a ball. Van Eyck did not stop and decided that they had already suffocated in the middle of this lump. But suddenly the roots began to disappear, as if dissolving, and bright, colorful, beautiful butterflies began to fly out of this ball.